Members and members of the public, make sure they have all mobile devices switched off, please, or put on silent. And can I remind members that a recording will be made of this meeting and can be made available for public listening at a later date. Gillian, can you confirm the SEDERUNT and explain the circumstances behind my assuming chair today, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we are quorate today. Councillor Martin, the Chair of the Planning Applications Committee, is unable to attend the meeting today. Therefore, Councillor Dempster will assume the role of Chair for the meeting.
Going to be one of these days, I can see. John underwent minor surgery in his eye, and his specialist or surgeon said he shouldn't read too many of the papers, so there's be an allegation he wasn't paying attention to the paper had he remained in the committee. So as a consequence of that, he's elected to remove himself from committee today. Gillian, can you confirm the SEDERUNT, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we are quorate today, and I have not received any apologies.
Thanks, Gillian. Do you have any declarations of interest on the agenda items today for any member? Peter, and then David McKee.
Item 9, as a shareholder of Persimmon Homes, I'll step down.
Thanks, Peter. David McKee.
I'll won't participate in item 4, Chair, because I wasn't at the meeting last month when it was discussed.
Thank you. And Ivor?
Chair, item 4, same reasons, Councillor McKee.
Thanks for that, Ivor. Andy and then Alistair.
Likewise, I left the meeting before that was started to be discussed.
Thanks, Andy. Alistair. Thank you for that, members. We now have the minute of the previous meeting. Is this a true record, and do members agree that this is a true minute of the meeting? Thank you very much. In that case, we come to Gillian. Can you outline the procedure that's to be followed today, please, for the Planning Applications Committee?
Thank you. Yes, the Planning Applications Committee will consider each application in turn as detailed on the agenda. The case officer or other appointed officer will make a short presentation addressing the determining issues accompanied by digital images. Any late information, amendments or corrections will be reported at this time. Members may ask questions of officers following the presentation on points of clarification. The Chairman has been provided with a list of eligible representatives who have registered to speak at this meeting within the period specified in Council policy. No other persons will be allowed to speak. The Chairman will individually invite those who have registered in advance to speak to make their presentation, after which they may be questioned by committee members. No questions may be asked of members. The order of eligible parties being heard will be as follows: third parties objecting to an application, third parties supporting an application, statutory consultees objecting to an application, elected members of Dumfries and Galloway Council who are not members of the Planning Applications Committee, and then the applicants or their agents. Representatives have been placed in alphabetical order, and a copy of the public speaking list is available from the committee officer taking notes of our proceedings. Presentations will be strictly limited to 3 minutes per person, except for national and major developments, which by their very nature are more complex, where the time limit will be 5 minutes. The Chairman of the committee will ask you to come to a conclusion if you take too long. Representatives are encouraged to use the time allocated to clarify any points they consider material and address the determining issues. Certain matters are not normally material planning considerations and will not be taken into account by the Council when deciding on a planning application. Representatives should not raise any new matters without explaining why they were not raised earlier with the case officer. Please do not repeat what is in the report, as members will have already read the report. After all the representations have been heard, the meeting is then in formal session and no members of the public may address the committee from the public gallery. The Planning Applications Committee will then proceed to determine the application. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Gillian. We now go to item 4 on the agenda, and just for the record, this is a continuation of a previous application. I'll ask Gillian to confirm which members are able to participate in the decision-making process, and apologies to members. The display on the wall on my right, your left, is the only one that's available today. The device has decided in part not to function properly. So Gillian, can you confirm which members are allowed to participate, please?
Thank you. Yes, in relation to the next item, item 4, only those members who heard original representation will be allowed to determine the application. Members who heard the original representation but did not attend the site visit are also allowed to determine the application. The members are as follows: Councillor Dempster, Councillor Blake, Councillor Carruthers, Councillor Dick, Councillor Dryborough, Councillor Gilroy, Councillor Maitland, Councillor McCautry, Councillor McComb, Councillor Thompson, Councillor Witts and Councillor Martin, although he's not present today. Thank you.
Thank you, Gillian. There appears to be enough members to make the meeting quorate with these number of members that have been declared able to participate today. So, Councillor McCain.
Do you want us to leave the room, or is it okay for us to sit in?
Who?
Me, because I'm not participating in the...
You remain if you wish, you just can't participate in the decision-making process.
Fine, thanks.
We'll now ask Andrew to go through the slides just to refresh our memory of where we were, and then we'll go straight into session. Thanks, members.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, the application is for erection of 3 houses in the formation of an access at the site at Stapleton Grange, which is situated about 2 kilometres northeast of Annan on the northern side of the B7357 road, as illustrated on the plan. And the development site in question is situated to the rear of a Category B listed steading buildings that have been converted into dwelling houses previously. And the site previously had agricultural buildings on it, as illustrated in this photograph from the design statement submitted with the application. And for those members that didn't go on the site visit, this is the current appearance of the site. It's the buildings have been removed, and it's an area of hard standing and grassland now. And so various views from, this is the site from the south at the back of the steading buildings, and those on the site visit will have noticed that the application site is situated at a higher level than the adjoining steading complex. This is the site from the east, and views of the surrounding landscape. It's in quite an open landscape, surrounded by grass fields. This is looking north. And this is the steading building that the site is situated next to. A very well, high quality design conversion has taken place here. This is the existing access road into the site. And then going around, we can just see some of the converted steading buildings. The application site is behind that timber fence. And that's the separation between the steading buildings on the left and the site on the right. In terms of the character of the group, these are some of the dwelling houses situated at the end of the group, which aren't listed, but they're traditional in form. Views from the site, this is from the west, although from the road, the appearance of the site is slightly more limited than that because of the hedge screening. From the east, the site is quite visible from the road leading to the north. And a zoom in will show how the relationship between the site and the steading buildings. In terms of proposal, it's for 3 large detached dwelling houses with an access road into the site. And the design approach is a modern, contemporary approach as illustrated in the elevations on the slide. And in terms of cross-sections as well, the proposed cross-section at the top there is from the west, and the one at the bottom is, no, sorry, the top one is from the east, and the bottom one is from the west. And there's some 3D images being submitted to show what the appearance of the dwelling houses would be like. So this is them from various different angles. In conclusion, after assessing the application against the relevant policies in the LDP, it's considered the proposal does not meet the requirements of beneficial redevelopment of a brownfield site, and as set out in the supplementary guidance, and the development to the rear, extending residential development into the rear fields, would not have regard to the character and layout of the group. It's also considered that design is inappropriate in this location and it fails to have regard and would detract from the scale, density, character and appearance of the adjoining steading buildings, and there's also some outstanding issues with regards to road access and drainage.
Thanks, Andrew. I presume we've already gone through the process of asking Andrew questions, therefore we're straight into session. Members? Councillor McCaughey, then Councillor Carruthers.
Having been the site visit, I think it was very informative. Certainly off the conclusion, I'm not against anything being developed there, but I couldn't support what is contained within the application. I think that once we're onto the surrounding roads, and you saw how visual that would be, I think it would certainly detract from the really good job that's been done on the conversion of the former farm into various households. So I'd be supportive of that being developed, but certainly not supportive of the current plans. Therefore, I would have to move against the current plans, but if something more suitable and more fitting came in, I'd certainly be supportive.
Thanks for that, Councillor Carruthers.
Thanks, Chairman. So it's pleasing to hear that from Councillor McCaughey in regards to his views. It's a similar view myself. I did feel, I said it previously, I felt it was a land use conflict. It would be better being developed. It was contained within the title deed of the actual existing farm holding. And it's only right that I think something should be constructed here, and the principle of development really has been established because of the previous use. There is, I think, with no recourse, potential to the planning authority, there's potential for that to be built, to be constructed back to where it was, 2 portable buildings and a silage clamp or a silage pit, however you want to describe it. So I think, I mean, I suppose taking into account what Councillor McCaughey's brought forward, I mean, I did think it was a legitimate attempt to try and reflect what had been there previously. You had the new type of portable buildings against the old traditional. But I think if we can agree, and I think if we get support in regards to that, the principle of development is there and it should be built, and that's how the council should look at that. I'll be happy enough to support what Councillor McCaughey's put forward, but I'd like to hear the views of the committee, obviously, Chairman.
I think we have to be very careful with what we're trying to say here. Councillor McCaughey is simply saying he's not happy with the proposal and he's recommending refusal. That isn't an in-principle decision for a development at a future date and ties this committee down to anything whatsoever. It's simply a refusal on the basis that the application does not meet what Councillor McCaughey sees as appropriate for this committee today. We're not getting an in-principle decision. We've got a planning application before us, and it's either a recommendation to approve or a recommendation to refuse. Whatever the applicant does after that is a matter for him or her. Do you want to come back in?
Thanks, Chairman. Yep. It'd be nice to hear what the rest of the committee was feeling, Chairman.
Members, Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks, Chair. I also attended the meeting at the site visit as well, and I agree with Tom entirely that, you know, the application in front of us today should be refused for the reasons actually given. I do agree in a certain extent that, you know, in future if something comes forward then we can re-look at the actual building, but it's not for this committee today, so happy to go with the recommendations.
Thanks very much for that, Councillor Dryborough. So we've got a recommendation for refusal from Councillor McCaughey, seconded by Councillor Dryborough, and I've got Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. Having visited the site, I'm fairly sure that it is a brownfield site. A large part of it is covered in concrete. It previously housed a sheep wash a silage clamp. There may well be issues of land contamination as well. Now, I've read the definition here of brownfield site, and it refers to derelict urban land. I would say there's also a category of derelict rural land, and that is what this site, in my opinion, belongs to. With regard to the design and massing of the buildings, I would agree with Councillor McCaughtrey. I don't think they sit well with the surrounding buildings. I think there is definitely an issue there. But as far as, being a brownfield site is concerned, I was pretty sure that that's what I was looking at when I visited the site.
I think if you look at 4.8, the officer's information to members is quite specific, and he's checked that with the appropriate department, and that is the definition, whether members like it or not. But we're not here to debate that today. We have a recommendation and a seconder. Are there any alternative proposals? Councillor Carruthers.
No alternative proposal, Chairman. But firstly, I'd like to thank the members for their views, for putting them forward. I appreciate that. I'm not going to make a recommendation other than what's been put forward. I'll agree with that, certainly at this moment in time. And I understand the principle you're saying. We're not predetermining any future applications at this moment in time either, so I take that on board as well. But no, and thank the committee very much for the site visit. It was very much appreciated, and I thought it gave everybody a chance to consider the application much better.
I'm sure members will appreciate your remarks, Ian. Thanks for that. So, Gillian, if you can confirm the decision of members, please.
Thank you. This application has been refused as detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Can somebody invite the other members back into the chamber that have left to declare their interest? Can you do it, Billy, please? Thank you. We'll just wait a minute or two until other members rejoin us. Thanks very much, members. We come to agenda item number 5, erection of poultry unit, installation of septic tank and 4 gas storage tanks, erection of 4 feed silos, formation of new access, erection of 1.2 metre high boundary fence and associated landscaping at ALTAIN, GLEN, SANDHEAD, STRANRAER. The application type full planning plan permission. The recommendation is approved subject to conditions. The case officer is Billy Murray, and the reference number is 15/P/1/0134. Billy, if you take us through your report when you're ready, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you say, this is an application for the erection of a poultry unit and associated works at a site at ALTAIN, GLEN, SANDHEAD. It's described as a poultry unit. In actual fact, to be more specific, it's an egg production unit. So I'll take you through the slides. This is the application site, as you see, to the south of SANDHEAD. It's essentially in 2 parts. The rectangular part is clearly the main part of the site where the buildings are to be sited, and then the narrow strip heading north is a new access road. That's a closer view of the application site. It runs from the U102 in ALTAIN Glen. It crosses the burn in the Glen through a strip of woodland alongside the Glen there, and then the new access road and the buildings. So these are some images of the site. This is the existing vehicular access. Planning permission for this access was granted in 2010. It has never been completed, so there are conditions on that access that require to be fulfilled. So they have been attached to, in terms of the recommendation in this application, the recommendation is that the same conditions would be attached. So again, this is a view from the access looking towards the field within which the site is located. The proposed new access road would run up just to the left of the fence line you see there up the slope. That's looking back towards the road at the part completed access. A closer view of the site as you approach the slope where the new access track will be. and that's partway up that slope looking back down, so there would be an access track running up in the line from where I'm standing, approximately to the gate there. This is a view from the same point looking across eastwards out to sea, mainly just to show the topography of the site. You see the strip of woodland on the left, which is alongside the Glen and the U102 public road, and the land rising from there to a high point towards the right of this image. The main part of the site where the buildings are to be is over the crest of the hill to our right in that view. So that's a similar view, but looking across the site again in an easterly direction, but showing the high point of the landform there. The main part of the application site itself starts on the falling ground on the right-hand side of the crest in that view. This is me standing on the high point looking back northwards towards Sandhead, and the building you see in the centre in that view is Sandhead Primary School. There are some residential properties just behind the primary school, but Sandhead Village itself is out of sight beyond the trees in the right-hand quarter of that view in that image. Again, from the high point, looking down towards the beach. And this is from the high point looking over the main part of the site. So that's a view looking south from the high point in the site. Similar view looking south along the eastern site boundary. The site is on the top of a raised beach, so just to the left of that line of whins, the landform falls very steeply to a narrow strip of agricultural land and beach. This is a northerly view from about halfway down the main part of the site, so that's looking back north towards the crest of the hill, and the trees beyond are the area where the primary school is. Similar, looking along the eastern boundary, you can see the primary school in that view. And this is the main part of the site, so that's me right down at the southern part of the site, looking back north. This is from the southwestern corner, so that's looking northeasterly across the site. This is the main part of the site again, in a southerly, southeasterly direction. And this is just an aerial view of the site to give you a better impression. Again, highlighting the belt of woodland alongside the road, the new access road, the main part of the site. You notice the dark line to the right of the site there as the gorse growth on the steep drop down to the beach. So that's the raised beach. The A716 runs past to the left, and the road running left-right in that view is the U102, which itself runs through the village of Sandhead. So these are the plans from the applicant. Location plan. This is the site plan. You'll see the access road, and it's 3 rectangular buildings lying parallel, orientated generally north-south. That's the proposed floor plan. As always, apologies for the reproduction, it's not good. This is the proposed elevations east and west. There is quite a bit of earthworks to level the site, so there's a bit of cut and fill, so that reduces the levels of the site. The material obtained from those earthworks are to be used to create earth bunds, as you see at each end of the site, of the buildings, sorry, there. And again, these are the elevations north and south.
Would you mind very much if we closed the curtains so we can actually get an idea? Because I think this is the critical
Sorry, Jane,
bit.
that's fine.
Please.
Can somebody close the curtains, please? Maybe it's the same electrics that's working the computer. No, here we go. Thanks very much. Do you want to move back a couple of images, Jane, or yeah?
The elevations.
Okay. Can you dim the lights, girls, please?
You see where the pointer is now at the left in the top view there. There's a reduction in levels there. And then at the northern end, because of the slope in the site, there's a bigger difference in level to the finished floor level and the bunding here. Similarly, in the view below, you see there's a cut into the landform here, so the low-lying buildings sit a bit lower. This view shows some planting here. Members will note from the recommendation that the feeling is that it would benefit from some more substantial planting rather than just gorse as proposed. So the recommendation contains conditions requiring agreement of a much more substantial and extensive scheme of planting to help assimilate the development into the landform. Similarly, on these two elevations, you can see change in levels there where the site's been formed, and again here, and in this view here, the proposed bund with the planting on the top, and not so much at this end because of the natural landform. So the recommendation is to approve, subject to conditions.
Before I ask the lasses to put on the lights and open the curtain again, although that may be too late, did anybody want to make reference to the slides that were up there from the applicant? No. Okay, we come to questions for the case officer then. Members? Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at this is a vast scale development. I may have missed it, but I can't see a landscape architect report.
There was no landscape architect's consultation in this proposal.
Peter?
Can I suggest that there should have been, given the huge scale of this development in the countryside?
Billy, is that a procedural thing, or is it just no practice that we do that with applications of this nature? David will deal with it.
The landscape architect is not a statutory consultee. We would call upon them where the officer is in any doubt themselves as to their professional ability to assess it. Certainly, large-scale wind farms and the like is what the bread and butter, if you like, of our landscape architect's work is at the moment. So it's only cases where the case officer really does not feel competent to be able to address it themselves, and Billy's level of experience is such that he obviously felt it wasn't essential to do so. They aren't a statutory consultee, so there's no procedural failing by not consulting them.
I would have to say, Peter, if you desperately wanted a view from the landscape architect and members supported that it could be deferred until such a request was fulfilled, do you want to come back in?
I think absolutely. This is a huge development. I mean, we had a similar one not so long ago in Loch Maben, and the scale of that development is only becoming evident as the buildings are going up. There was a landscape architect opinion then, and I think we ought to be insisting on this development.
Well, before I bring Jane in, that then takes us to a point in the business where we need to determine whether or no we want to defer this application. Although I suppose we could hear what this members have to say. It's not maybe imperative that we have a decision now. Gillian, what's your view?
It's just questions for the officers at this time.
Well, I think officers have answered it. In their professional opinion, they don't think a landscape architect's view is necessary because Billy's professional judgment is satisfactory. But if members want a view from a landscape architect, they're absolutely entitled to ask for and request that. We'll carry on with the debate, and I'll come back to you, Peter, before we finish. I've got Jane Maitland and then Ian Carruthers.
Well, I think my question related actually to the same sort of issue. Those silo hopper things sit right up above the landscaping, if I have read that correctly as well. I think I'm inclined to support my colleague here about considering carefully about what the impact will be. If you look at the photographs there, the thing sits right up on the top. And my question really to the officer is, I mean, did we really consider whether there would be a serious impact upon this particular area of landscape? And given the heights of what is suggested.
Billy, do you want to respond to that?
Well, I would have to say that yes, I always seriously consider all of the issues, including any visual impact and including any landscape impact. I think I do mention it in the report. You know, any development such as this, it has some impact. You know, inevitably there is a visual impact. I think the critical things to note here that is from the key receptors to the north, the key public receptors, the site itself is over the high point in the landform. So the ground is already starting to fall when you come to the main part of the site. There is then an element of cut into that slope to create the level site itself as you see it. And yes, I did consider carefully the silos. They will, obviously, because they're the highest element of the development, they will be partially in sight from the north. But in my view, and my professional judgment, that impact was not so adverse as to justify rejecting the proposal on those grounds. You know, they will be seen, but as I say, that's inevitable in any such development.
Okay, Jane, I've got Ian Carruthers, and I've got Alistair Geddes, and I've got Stephen Thompson and Alistair Witts.
Thanks. Just a point, Chairman, in regards to the process we were discussing at the time, and it was just to ask if we did get into session before we made that decision to defer, if that would be the case. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Alistair?
Yeah, my point's a process one as well, Chair. As I say, at the appropriate time, depending on the way that matters unfold, I would want to come back on this because, you know, I'm of a view to trust the exercise of the case officer's professional judgment, as has already been indicated in an answer to an earlier question.
Thanks, Alistair. Stephen Thompson?
Thank you, Chair. It was just a couple of questions on the actual report. I'm just wondering, on page 33, section 4.4, I'm actually wondering why that actually needs to be there. The last sentence starts off, which is where I thought we were, which is each application must be considered on its individual merits. And then the last bit is basically saying, but there's a precedent. So I'm just wondering about the wisdom of putting that there. And also, over the page, on page 36, top of that, there have been few, if any, recorded complaints in relation to operational poultry. Is it few, or are there any? I just wanted, if there was, which one it was. So if you could clarify that for me, that would be great. Thanks.
Billy, I would suppose what Billy's saying is what's a factual thing. We have a number of chicken site things, and his professional judgment is we didn't get, but he's putting it in there anyway. But Billy, can you just answer that, please?
Yes, I think on the first point, you know, I take your point, but what we were trying to say there was that there is an acceptance across the board that these are legitimate agricultural developments. It's not being treated in any different way, that it's, quote, an industrial type development. There are agricultural developments, and there's quite a history of these throughout Dumfries and Galloway and elsewhere, and they have been built quite successfully. In terms of the way I've phrased the other query you have, that was partially because when I sought absolute definitive information from my colleagues in environmental standards, they weren't, in my view, able to give me it such that I could say there had been none. Partially that was their words. They've had hardly any that they have recorded, and there certainly has never been a statutory complaint. From my own personal experience over the years, I've dealt with a good half dozen poultry units in the Machers area, several of which generated many objections, and there have been no issues arising with them since they became operational. So a combination of those two things was the reason why I phrased that in that way. I didn't feel that it was safe to say there had been none because of the information I was getting back from environmental standards.
Thanks for that, Billy. Alistair Witts?
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to seek some more clarification in terms of paragraph 4.26 on page 37, and I can see that the council archaeologist is fairly relaxed about this, but however, in view of certain historical sites in the vicinity, has exercised requested a laws, and I just wondered how that panned out. If the excavation started in something, if we find the tomb of King Arthur or something terribly significant, what happens then? I mean, is that why this is here, just to put a stop on it if something really significant is uncovered?
Billy?
Yes, I think that's correct. You know, there are aerial photographs that show potential evidence of activity in the past in terms of crop marks, albeit just to the north of the main part of the application site. It would be traversed by the access tract. So yes, that condition is recommended. Initially, it would be a watching brief condition so that it was monitored during groundbreaking works and excavations. And clearly, if something of national importance was found during that time, potentially, that the development could not go ahead until that had been fully resolved in similar ways as happened to the Dunragget bypass, which is not a million miles away from there, where all these archaeological works had to be completed before the development could go ahead.
Thanks, Alistair. Any other questions for the case officer? Andy?
Thanks, Chair. I just want to give a bit of clarification in 4.8. We have a landscape assessment already carried out on the Rins Peninsula, am I correct? And that said the site is located is not subject to any statutory landscape designations. Given that statement, when it comes to the right time, I'm in mind to be in agreement with Councillor Geddes in that we should trust the officer's judgment on this, given that position is already taken elsewhere.
Happy with that, Andy. I take it we're still in questions for officers because we then got you through the process of listening to the applicant, the objector, and then get into session before we can make any proposals about what we do and do not ask the officers to do for us. Peter, do you want to come back? Question for officers?
Yes, please. On the separate point, just referring to policy NE13, developments located on areas of good quality agricultural soils will only be supported where they conform to spatial strategy of a plan and there's no alternative on less good quality land. As a farmer, I can see that that's decent, very decent grassland and possibly arable, I don't know. Maybe the officer could answer that. And secondly, I'd like to see that the applicant has demonstrated that he has looked at other areas of less good quality agricultural land for a site.
Billy?
I think, as I tried to say in that paragraph, that policy is really to try and restrict non-agricultural uses using good quality agricultural land. For policy analysis, it's accepted that poultry rearing is an agricultural activity. So therefore, we felt that there was not a material conflict with that policy for that reason. No, we did not ask for any kind of sequential information, such as you suggest, in terms of a demonstration that they had looked at other areas of less good quality agricultural soil. They had looked at other areas around the main farm itself, but those areas, as you'll see from the report, were rejected for other reasons.
Thanks, Peter. If there are no, Jane?
On paragraph 4.8, is it possible to tell me, for clarification, the third line from the bottom, to a high point some 11 metres above road level at a distance of 150 metres to the south? Now, could I possibly ask about the finished floor level? Whereabouts, if there's going to be a bit of cut, is this going to be perched 11 metres above the road level, or is there going to be cut in? And maybe I could have some help with that, please.
Billy?
Sorry, David, thanks. If you look at that view, the road level to which I'm referring is the public road, which is to the left of the tree belt and the left of that view there. That view was taken to show how much the ground rises to the high point. You come over the crest there to the right, the ground starts to fall away from there, which is where the buildings are. So the floor level, there's a cut into the falling slope to the right. So the floor level is, so the high point may be 11 metres above, but the actual finished floor level and site level is not perched up on the top as you suggest. It's cut in beyond the summit.
Jane, okay, I've got Stephen.
Yeah, thank you again, Chair. It's just on the back of that. I know in some other applications we've looked at this committee, we've been shown potential developments that have been visible from the likes of ferries. Is this likely to be visible for boats and ferries, and is that really something we should be considering?
Billy?
There are no ferries there. Maybe there should be. Sandhead Reef might be quite an interesting route. Again, similar to my response to Councillor Maitland earlier on, there will be visibility of this development. You know, there's no question this is quite a substantial development. There will be some visibility. People in boats in the bay will be able to see it. I made a comment in the report, I think, that in closer views, so from people using the path or walking on the beach, because of the steep slope of the raised beach and because they'll be so close to it, you would be looking up at a very steep angle. So for people using the beach in that area, it'll be almost invisible because of the slope they're looking up. Clearly, out in the bay, if you're on a boat, you would be able to see it, yes.
Thanks for that. Okay, if there are no other questions for officers, thanks, Billy. We now come to the first objector, John Ferguson. If you'd like to come forward, please. We'll get your microphone switched on for you. I have a stopwatch, Mr. Ferguson. You have 3 minutes. I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go, just to sum up, please, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Firstly, the application doesn't meet many of the policies contained within the local development plan, which seeks to approve developments that can contribute to a sustainable rural economy. It is hard to see how this proposal will do so. This proposal provides very little economic opportunity for Dumfries and Galloway or the South Rins. There are two main outproducts from the poultry unit. Eggs will be exported out with the region to international markets, providing no trading opportunities for other businesses within the region. Waste will be transported by road to Fife for processing, providing no benefit to other businesses within the region. It makes no advantage from being sited in Dumfries and Galloway, nor with their origin being promoted internationally. The application fails to adequately explain how it will be a benefit to the community or support the growth of a sustainable rural economy within Dumfries and Galloway. Secondly, there are issues with the road access. The plan application and the response from the Planning Department has played this down. It fails to recognise that the road at the entrance is very narrow, and no matter what direction they are travelling, an articulated lorry will have to use both sides of the carriageway to manoeuvre under subsequent risk caused. The speed restrictions at the school noted by the planning authority are only in operation at school opening and closing times. It also ignores the junction by ALTAIN Cottage on the A716 is an accident black spot. Indeed, there was an accident there 2 weeks ago, which will not be helped by articulated lorries making a 90-degree turn from a standing start, then going uphill and navigating a blind corner. Finally, turning to the overarching principle in the local development plan, which says planning has an obligation to contribute towards sustainable development, reducing the impact of climate change and creating high-quality places. This application makes no efforts to address climate change nor offer a sustainable development. The proposals do not help Dumfries and Galloway contribute to the Scottish Government's legal requirements outlined in Climate Change Scotland Act 2009 to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. The operation of the poultry unit will do the opposite. Due to long lorry journeys and worldwide transport, it's separated by the isolated nature of the site. The construction of the facility on an entirely greenfield site and good quality agricultural land, the associated surface water drainage may bring a flood risk to the stream that runs through ALTAIN, GLEN and Cairnwheel Burn.
You've got 30 seconds left, sir.
I've got half a page. which may bring environmental damage. The sheds will provide no natural daylight to the chickens, so make no use of passive solar gain opportunities. No sustainable construction techniques have been outlined. The proposals goes against policy OP1 of the local development plan, offering nothing that can enhance biodiversity within Dumfries and Galloway. No explanation about how...
Please.
Sorry?
Can you draw your presentation to a conclusion, please?
The operational site will generate carbon dioxide emissions, and the fuel for the heating the site will LPG with further impact this.
That means stop, Mr. Ferguson.
That's it. All this should see the application rejected.
Thank you very much. Do any members have any questions for Mr. Ferguson? Just in case when he's looking for clarity, Mr. Ferguson. Okay, not if you'd like to return to your seat, thank you very much for your presentation. We now have David Fallis and Robin Torrance, the agent and the applicant. You will have 3 minutes collectively, Mr. Fallis. I'll remind you 30 seconds to go to draw your presentation to a conclusion, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee this morning. Well, nothing further to add to the details in the report. It fairly represents the comprehensive information we provided in the supplementary statement. The matters just raised now by the representative are matters that were raised during the consultation phase of the application, which we submitted supplementary information, an addendum to that, which again have been fairly copied within the context of the report, and some additional information that the case officer asked for that was included within that. So we've got nothing further to add in respect of matters that have been raised today or that's contained within the report, but we're conscious and aware of quite a few questions there at the start, and I'm happy to help councillors with any questions or matters they may have in respect of those issues.
Thanks very much, Mr. Fallis. That's helpful. Members, do you have any questions for either Mr. Fallis or Mr. Torrance? It's a single opportunity to ask questions. I've got Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Fallis, could you help me in explaining how this development actually complies with policy OP1? And just for help, I'll read this out. Development considerations. Development proposals should be compatible with the character and amenity of the area and should not conflict with nearby land issues. And under C, landscape development proposals should respect, protect and/or enhance the region's rich landscape character, scenic qualities and features and sites designated for their landscape quality at any level. They should also reflect the scale and local distinctiveness of the landscape.
If we could deal, with the first matter first, what is material to your considerations here is the context of the fact that this is an agricultural development on agricultural land, and with that regard, is the illustration showed you today, the pasture there. Had the photograph turned around 180 degrees, there was a large agricultural complex of similar sized, if not taller, buildings that's in the area that, in actual fact, characterise the area from the rural point of view. So we don't see any issue in respect of, land use conflict. With regards to the second point that was raised, again, we've assessed the site in the context of all the other policies within the local development plan regarding the environmental protection section, the policy and the heritage aspect, none of which specifically cover the site. It's not formally designated in any way as a formally protected area, and in the context of what those policies set out, it was regarded that the development actually accorded with the general principles, and as they have been applied in other cases on similar developments, similar situations that are not protected or are required to be kept intact without any impact on them at all. If it is indeed the council's idea that development in the rural area should not take place in any way, shape or form, then policies should be there for it. But we've got a situation here where there is an opportunity to, improve the economic viability and commercial aspects within our rural area, which again, the local development plan is a great raft of policies, and you do have that on balance decision. I know it's a word that's bandied about in the committee here many times, some well received, sometimes not well received. But, there's a lot of policies within the plan that's trying to encourage development, encourage growth within the local economy in the local area, and for Dumfries and Galloway to be considered from a national point of view to be an area for these sorts of businesses and concerns to be set up. So it's an opportunity that's available to the area.
Peter, do you want to come back?
Can I just come back? Just at the beginning of your answer, you said that there were, if I understood you correctly, that there were buildings of similar scale in that area on the slide. I think I missed that.
Not on the slide. The slide that you showed, the ones that the case officer have presented today are of the application site itself. If you were to turn around 180 degrees, on the other side of the little valley that the road running north-south is, on that there's a large agricultural unit with bigger buildings. It's I think it's a mixed farming unit there, so there's livestock buildings, etc., etc. And these are the sorts of buildings and constructions that are quite commonplace across our rural area now that people are aware of. They see them for agricultural. It's a rural area, and that's the sort of environment they expect them to be in.
Peter, I wouldn't like to hog
See just at the bottom left-hand corner? It's a large dairy unit that's just there. And then, again, the length and breadth of the road there, there's similar situations of other large farm units.
Peter.
So I don't want to labour the point, Chairman. I just want to establish the respective scale of this thing. We're talking something that is about 5,500 square metres, if I'm correct. That steading that I can see on the bottom left there, I'm guessing is a quarter of the size. I don't know, but there is it's huge scale. It's traditional buildings by the looks of things as well.
Thanks for that.
Again, if you could just come on to that. From comparison-wise, you're looking at it from a viewpoint that you will never have in the real world with regards to when you're, travelling, through this landscape yourself. You see the steading there itself. The one that we're referring to is potentially the area of buildings that it covers and the way that you'll see it. Again, very little screening of that. You will see it in its part, and it is, a half to 2/3 of the size of the area that we're talking about. The area that we've got, there's a lot of screening. There's supplementary planning being requested through a specific condition, which we've got no objection to. All the existing screening that's in place is not being touched. It's been carefully sited to have minimal effect upon its setting. We've had the buildings off the top of the highest point, so a lot of the likes of the view from the school, that is partially screened by the existing landforms themselves, and they'll be set down. You might see the top half of the buildings themselves, but again, a situation that it's not going to be here up front, right in your face. It's very much a distant view that you'll have. As the case officer correctly said, with regards to down in the beach, the angle of repose you've got for it is such that you won't see the buildings. It's at such a steep angle. And again, round about the buildings as well, it's a similar situation. You're set down quite low from where the buildings are, so they're not quite as conspicuous. They're as visually in your face as you might otherwise perceive from this very, isolated, not isolated, but very particular view that you have straight above it, which you would not normally have.
Before we go on, can we try and make the response as brief as the questions are, please, and still get to the point? Aye, if you don't mind. Councillor Dryborough.
Thanks very much, Mr. Fallis. You'll have heard the previous objector, John Ferguson, talking about there was no economical benefit to the region with this particular application. What would be your response to that?
The development will bring money into the local area. It's going to provide jobs for people that are going to be staying in the local area. It also helps and greatly supports the existing agricultural business itself. So, again, in that way, it is bringing investment into the area. and retaining that and maintaining that within the economic fabric. It's fine to say these are the sorts of units that could be here, there, they could be anywhere. The critical thing, though, is why shouldn't Dumfries and Galloway get them? We've got a rural economy, we've got a workforce that is capable, is competent, and provides the degree of expertise that people are looking for, you know, as my client does, who presently runs poultry units.
Thanks for that. Alistair Whitson and Jen Maitland.
Oh, with his psychic powers, Councillor Driver has stolen my question. It was the economic one.
Thank you, Jen Maitland.
I think, as the pictures show, this is an absolutely new development on the coast, and so I think it's absolutely right that we should, you know, pick away at the detail of what is being proposed. We've heard, you know, and you've said clearly that it's going to be olive green walls and grey slate, and I think that's, you know, recessive, suitably recessive. But again, I go on about these silos, which are going to poke up above the top. And what are they going to look like? Could you help us with that? Because it's come to my attention that people are getting a bit more sophisticated about wind turbines. And these wind turbines now are beginning to grow in a greenish spattered way and up to a sort of soft grey. So we are becoming more sophisticated and more able to design properly. I have no difficulty at all with the principle, actually, of an agricultural building. I think it's quite appropriate, but I think we should be careful. So if you could help me with that, please.
Thanks, Jane. David?
The silos that were shown are the sort of things that have been done elsewhere, but just been speaking to Robin there. If it is a concern of the council that they may be unduly conspicuous, it is possible to get slightly smaller, squatter ones. And it's possible to get them coloured to match in with the colour scheme for the buildings, both walls and roof. Again, if that's at the behest of the council, if that helps them overcome some of the concerns about how conspicuous it's going to be, then we could try to accommodate that if it were included as part of a condition.
I think that's very helpful, and Jane, if you get to the stage where you feel as if you'd like to approve it, you can maybe make that a part of a condition. So, does any other member have any questions for the applicant or his agent? In that case, thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. Members now in session. Councillor Dryborough.
Chair, thanks very much. I understand that, you know, some people may have some concerns about this particular thing, and after what happened at the last committee, I think it's right that we come to a conclusion today. I think I've got enough information in this particular report to come to that conclusion, and I would so put forward.
Repeat that last bit.
It may be that some people may want a site visit. I think we have a opportunity to get this concluded today.
So you're not requesting one, you're thinking it might be a good idea. Fine. Councillor Geddes and Councillor Maitland.
Well, I would be of the view so that we have sufficient information before us today to determine the application, and quite frankly, having read the report and listened to the comments and the questions, I'm of a mind, in fact, that the application should be granted, probably on the basis of the case officer's recommendations. But if there is an issue, as it were, of some sort of attempting to mitigate by condition the impact of the silos, I would be prepared to listen to colleagues' comments on that, Chair.
So I've got Councillor Maitland enthusiastically waving.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Chairman. Could we take into account the possibility of mitigation with respect to the size and design of the silos? I would absolutely happily go with the officers could take that forward. We've been told in committee that that's possible. Could that be conditioned in that officers deal with that particular issue?
David seems to be of the opinion that it can be. Can you just confirm to Member David, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you could competently attach a condition basically saying that there's no permission granted for the specific silos showing and requiring additional information, and would probably add in something as well saying that they shall be of a colour which shall be recessive or match the building and be of the smallest design as possible.
So I take it then that's a motion from Councillor Geddes and a seconder from Councillor Maitland. Councillor McKee.
I say, Chair, in reading this paper, I've had concerns about the road traffic and the school issues. And I notice on page 31, 3.1d, the last sentence, already issues with access to school from the village, which involves parents walking on the main road with buggies. Increase in heavy industrial traffic would increase the risk of accidents. Can I ask how far the school is for the village, and if is there room beside the road to put a pavement in there and reduce the risk to the parents walking along that road? As you know, we've got in another place we've got issues with that sort of thing, and you can shake your head as much as you like, sir. But I would ask if it would be reasonable to put a condition on that a pavement be laid alongside the road to the school.
I would suggest that's not reasonable because it doesn't affect or near the application site, and it's an observation by the roads manager. There is no provision for us to make such a condition. We can make a request, but certainly no condition. And I don't think we should be compromising the committee with trying to redefine what's road matters and what planning matters. The planning application before you, and the officer's recommendations there as well. David, can you just maybe respond to Councillor McKee's points, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you basically summed it up nicely there. If you look on the inside cover of the agenda papers, paragraph 4 there gives the use of conditions requirements, which is set out in Circular 4, 1998. And you'll notice the third one down is any condition has to be relevant to the development to be permitted. Given the distances involved and the likelihood of this development directly affecting on people walking to school, I would say that that wouldn't be a reasonable condition, and it could quite satisfactorily be challenged. It would be an ultra vires condition is the technical term for it. If members have concerns, then obviously there is a route of going through DG first to seek the possibility of them including that, but that's obviously not a remit to this committee.
Thanks for that, David. I've got Peter Diggle and I've got Jim McComb. Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Just harking back to a previous planning application, some of the supporting documents, and I quote, "The site may be visible by 5 to 6 nearby dwellings and the nearby A709. It is evident now that as that development goes up, it is probably looked upon by, I'm guessing, 20 to 30 nearby dwellings, not 5 to 6, as was reported in the report. So I would like to propose an amendment that we have a site visit and a landscape architect's report."
Okay, I've got Councillor McComb.
Thanks, Chair. I've listened very carefully to the presentation this morning. What I see is a site which is screened by trees on, I believe, 3 sides. It is on the reverse side of a convex slope, will not be visible from Sandhead. There is a proposal for bounding and also landscaping to enhance the screening effect of the bound. There is an offer from the developer to reduce the scale of the silos. And on the basis of these things, it is undoubtedly a very large development. You can't hide that. Some of it will be visible, but I would be prepared to support the application with the concession the developer has made on the silos.
Thanks for that, Jim. So, we have a proposal from Peter Diggle. We have a site visit. Do we have a seconder for that? Ian? You've seconded that, okay. Councillor Dryborough?
I propose that we have enough information to get this today and not go.
I think Alistair's already done that and included in that at the same time an approval with an additional condition.
I did indeed, sir. I made it clear right at the start that, you know, part of my motion was in fact that we had sufficient information before us today to determine the application.
And I thought you had accepted the amendment that Jane proposed.
Yeah, yes, indeed, sir. Yes.
For that, okay. Gillian?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just at present we have a motion by Councillor Diggle, seconded by Councillor Carruthers for a site visit, and we have an amendment by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Dryborough, to determine the application today and not have the site visit.
That's it.
I thought Councillor Diggle said site visit and information from landscape architect.
Yes, he did, and
So
that
is
would
it-
form part of the
that-
agreement if
It's not
that.
what was read out.
Okay, and it includes an assessment by landscape architect. Gillian, if we can just confirm again what Councillor Diggle's proposal was, please.
The actual proposal, just at the moment, it's just a determination in relation to the site visit.
Okay, that's fine, and then we can come back to
Yes.
that, right? Aye, okay.
So the motion is for the site visit, the amendment is to determine at present. Councillor Dempster,
Amendment.
Councillor Blake,
Motion.
Councillor Carruthers,
Motion.
Councillor Diggle, Councillor Dryborough,
Amendment.
Councillor Ferguson,
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes,
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy, Councillor Groom,
Motion.
Councillor Hislop,
Amendment.
Councillor Maitland,
Amendment.
Councillor McGregor, Councillor McCaughtry,
Motion.
Councillor McComb,
Amendment.
Councillor McKee,
Amendment.
Councillor Syme,
Amendment.
Councillor Thompson,
Amendment.
and Councillor Witts.
Amendment.
With 7 votes to the motion and 11 to the amendment, the application will be determined today. No site visit will take place.
Okay, we now come to the proposal Councillor Geddes placed before members that we agree with recommendation, additional condition in relation to the silos, and that has been agreed, I presume, by Councillor Maitland as a seconder. Councillor McGregor.
Thank you, Chairman. I have to confess that I think we do need more information about the associated landscaping. We had information on a previous application for poultry sheds, and we went in good heart and spirit on what was in front of us. What we've ended up with is actually a blot on the landscape and an absolute abomination within the countryside. So I think we do need some much more detailed information about the landscaping in a report as such, so I would move that as a motion.
Thanks for that. I think Billy said that Goss was proposed, but he was not content with that, and I presume that'll be a condition of
Be a
the report
condition,
that
right,
has to be
okay.
agreed with officers before approval will be granted, provided that's the direction members take. No, so I'm going to Peter now about the landscape architect's report that you requested, and then I'll come to Ivor next.
So just clarification, did Gail propose a motion there? Yeah, I'll second that. I think we ought to defer this.
Part of it, I thought you just wanted to sort out the tree and the
So
associated.
it's to get a full landscape
Okay, my
architect's report
apologies.
on before any decision is made. I don't actually think we can make a decision on this until we know the visual impact of what this development is actually going to have in the countryside. We've seen it before, and that was what I requested.
Aye, so aye, David's just right. We've already taken a decision based on the last vote that we will determine this application today. So in order to comply with your request, it'll have to be refused. And that would have to be the motion. And I'll ask David to clarify that before we go any further. And then I've got Ivor, I think Peter, did you have your hand up as well? So it's Peter, Ivor, and then Patsy. David will just clarify first the exact situation that we have found ourselves in.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Because the committee's last vote there was clearly to determine it today by 11 votes to 7. then it's obviously incumbent on you now to determine it today. You have the alternative of, you have Councillor Geddes' motion to approve subject to the additional condition put forward by Councillor Maitland. But as a committee, if you disagree with that, you could have the grounds for refusal of insufficient information to allow you to safely determine it today. So in the absence of additional information from landscape architect, it should be refused.
So, heard Gail, it's Peter, then Ivor, then Patsy, and then Alistair. Peter.
Just for procedural, my understanding, my original motion was for a site visit and landscape architect report, and then Gillian came in and separated the two out. And I was quite happy to that, but my understanding on that was that we could revisit deferring the application so as to get a landscape architect report. That was my understanding.
Alistair's motion was determine it today and approve the officer's recommendation as well. And we didn't do that either because there was a clear definition. We had to make a decision first on whether or not to determine it today. That's what we've done. And we now come to the two proposals that are on the table.
We've just had a vote on whether we have a site visit or don't have a site visit, and both Alistair and Peter's other additional parts were not mentioned in that. I mean, if the clerk rereads what we've just voted on... That has to be
determined first as a point of order. It's a site visit, end of story, or not site visit.
That was what we voted on.
That's what we had to do. That's what we're required to do. If we haven't taken a site visit, then we're obliged to determine it today because it's in front of us. And you can now either refuse it on the basis that you've not got enough information, or you can approve it on the recommendation that Alistair Geddes has put forward and seconded by Jane Maitland.
That's Chairman. Just because we decided not to have a site visit doesn't mean to say that we can't defer it on other reasons. I would have said, and the deferral would possibly have been because we would want further information from our own landscape architect.
Deferral, fine, it then becomes a deferral instead of refusal, but we're still determining something today.
But you're saying that we have to either approve or refuse. Perhaps we're wanting a deferral for a landscape architect.
Gillian will advise.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the original motion amendment was on the basis of whether to have a site visit or not. And that was determined, and it was decided that there'd be no site visit, and we had enough information to determine today. No site visit. We've now got a motion by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Maitland, to approve, subject to the conditions detailed in the report and the additional condition. We have an amendment by Councillor Diggle, seconded by Councillor McGregor, for further information in relation to landscape architect. Landscape architect, that information was needed. So my view would be that they would have to be refused on that information.
Do members want to defer this for further information? No. In that case, you've got...
Point of order. Everybody else seems to get in with that. I've been waiting for a while. Councillor Geddes specifically moved that there was sufficient information before us today to determine the application. 11 people voted for that, and was it 6 or 7 voted against? That was the motion that Councillor Geddes mentioned. If we want to revisit this, we'd have to have a 48-hour signature thing, because we've taken a decision. We have taken that decision, and we've moved on from that. And it was specific in the wording. And that, if you want to get the recording, I'm sure it will tell you that Councillor Geddes said there was sufficient information to determine today.
Decided. Governance decided. The decision we made had to be made specifically on whether or not a site visit was required. That's what governance did. That excluded the part that Alistair put in and excluded the part that Peter Diggle put in. And now we're in a position where governance is telling us, unless governance wants to change her mind, that we require to determine this today. And it might be that the simple thing might be deferral and get another report back. But I'm in members' hands. But what I'm not going to have is a bun fight. I've got about 6 folk wanting to speak, and we're not going to get any further unless we get professional guidance and accept professional guidance for what it is. Tom.
Chairman, I voted for the motion, which was a site visit. I was quite clear in my own mind what the amendment was, and the amendment was determine the application today. Now, that is the end of the matter. I lost on that vote. Therefore, what was carried, and under standing orders, you determine that application today. You cannot ask for anything else, either to say yes or no. Where members are getting confused, in the past, if somebody asked for a site visit, somebody else would probably move no site visit. That's where some folk are getting confused. What's determined today is that the actual amendment was, let's determine this today, rather than saying no site visit. I'm clear in my own mind on the way I voted. If other members who voted the same way as me aren't clear, they haven't been listening.
What I'm going to do is have a 5-minute recess, and Gillian will check with legal. Nobody else is going to speak. Nobody, because you're about 6 and turning in. We'll get professional advice from senior legal, and then we'll be back. We'll have a comfort break for 5 minutes. Gillian, can you advise members of what the advice, governance advice is? And this is what we're going to follow, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for allowing me the time to adjourn to seek advice on the matter. Having sought advice, the decision is that it has to be determined today. Therefore, if there is further information required, it would have to be an amendment to refuse on the basis that further information is required, and we don't have sufficient information to determine today. Thank you.
So there's no opportunity for additional information, so it's a refusal, and on the refusal, other information can be requested. Councillor Ferguson, no, you're okay. Right, now I know I had a number of members. That's clearly changed now with the advice we've had. We're now in a position where we have to determine it today, either by approval or by refusal. And if there's a refusal, there can be a request for additional information to be provided before it's brought back, or additional information sought before it's brought back. Currently, I presume we have a position here where Councillor Geddes has still proposed a motion to approve the additional condition of the silos, and that's still seconded by Councillor Maitland. Yeah, okay. And now, Councillor Diggle, we're looking for an amendment if there is one.
Thank you, Chair. I totally respect governance advice. I disagree with it, but I respect it. I wouldn't have voted against this yet, certainly not without a landscape report, which we're now being denied. But I have no choice is to propose an amendment to refuse this application, because I cannot get the information that I hoped I would be able to get and was told I would be able to get.
To save any additional confusion, can you then outline what information you would like, so that in the event of it being refused and you get support for it being refused, you then know what information will come before us? Because the last thing we want is to go back to a situation where we're going to defer it next month because we don't have the appropriate information. So let's determine now what information might require in the event it being refused.
Very, very happy.
David wants to clarify something as well.
Just to be clear, if the application is refused, it is refused. The application cannot come back at a future month. That's the determination. The applicant would, however, within a 12-month period of the refusal, have the opportunity to resubmit an application. The frustration on the behalf of the applicant, obviously, is it's not within their gift to seek a landscape architect's consultation. So I don't think there's any additional information which they would have to do. It's just we find ourselves in the position here where the governance advises it has to be determined today, in which case if members aren't comfortable with the level of information you have, the only option is to refuse it on the grounds of insufficient information and consultation details. A further free-go application could then come in, and hearing what members have said, we clearly would consult the landscape architect to satisfy members' curiosity in the matter.
Okay. Gail, did you want to come in on the back of Peter's proposal?
Oh yeah, I'm not at all happy with the governance advice that we're getting today in the advice. How can we refuse today but then defer next month if it does come back and we don't have the right information? Everything's at 6s and 7s. But I'm happy to second Councillor Diggle. I do think that we need a full landscape architect's report.
Okay, in that case, we have a motion and an amendment. Can you remind members what they are and what they consist of, Gillian, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have a motion by Councillor Geddes, seconded by Councillor Maitland, to approve the application subject to the conditions detailed in the report and the additional one in relation to the silo.
It's another condition that a silo has to be agreed by style, shape and design has to be agreed by planning officer.
And we have an amendment by Councillor Diggle, seconded by Councillor McGregor, to refuse the application on the basis of insufficient information. Councillor Dempster.
Motion.
Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Carruthers.
Amendment.
Councillor Diggle. Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson.
Motion.
Councillor Geddes.
Motion.
Councillor Gilroy. Councillor Groom. Councillor Hislop.
Motion.
Councillor McGregor. Councillor Maitland.
Motion.
Councillor McCautry.
Motion.
Councillor McComb.
Motion.
Councillor McKee.
Motion.
Councillor Syme. Councillor Thompson.
Motion.
And Councillor Witts.
Motion.
With 12 votes to the motion and 6 to the amendment, the application has been approved subject to the condition detailed in the report and the additional condition in relation to the silo. Thank you.
Apologies for that chaos, members and members of the public, but at least we got a decision in the end. Thanks, Dom. We now come to item number 6. Erection of dwelling house with integral double garage and installation of 14 photovoltaic solar panels to south elevation at AMBOSELI, KIRK Road, New Galloway. Application types full planning permission. Recommendations to refuse. The case officer Judith Turnbull and the reference is 15/P/2/0200. Judith, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Moving on to, this is the application site. It's on the northeastern edge of New Galloway. The site's quite sloping from the north to the south. There's an access strip from Kirk Road, and the dwelling house will be sited in the larger part of the site to the east. The site's within the settlement boundary, and it's on a remaining part of a largely developed site with a history as far back as 1991. The original cottage, Overton Cottage, is adjacent to Kirk Road, and the two dwellings. Don't think I can. Can't seem to get it. The two dwellings, this is Amboseli here and Scarabo here, and the dwelling house will be sited down this part of the application site.
Members want the curtain closed, or are you happy with what you can see? Okay.
The site is within the Galloway Hills Regional Scenic Area. Moving on to the block plan, the main part, the dwelling house here. These hedges are largely in position at the moment. This is an existing paddock, and there's also a paddock being formed here on the western part of the site. The existing track to Amboseli comes in here and up like this, and this would be a new track that would be formed. As you can see, there's ample parking and turning within the site. There's the floor plans and elevations. The western elevation would be facing Kirk Road. That's the western elevation, which is facing Kirk Road. And this is the south elevation, which unfortunately hasn't come out very well, which would be facing down the hill with the north elevation towards Overton House to the north, obviously. Plans, ground floor plan. It's called second floor, but I think I would call that first floor plan, which only doesn't extend all the way along, and the second floor, third floor plan, which is this part here. So the ground floor plan extends all the way along, then the first floor goes along to here, and this is obviously the third floor, which is just an open attic space. Proposed section through the highest part of the dwelling house, and street view, which is inverted commas because it isn't really a street, it's really from down the hill looking up. Overton Cottage would be here with Kirk Road down here, then Scarabo, then Amboseli, Overton, which sits higher up towards the north, and the proposed dwelling here. Moving on to the slides, this is a view just down, looking down Kirk Road. This is the access into Scarabo here, and the access to Amboseli and the proposed dwelling house further down. This is walking in the track. It's fairly overgrown at the moment, and moving further along, you get to the entrance to Amboseli, and the track would continue along here through the gate and then up the hill. This is through the gate looking up the hill. That's Overton House, and the hedges to the right hand side. It's quite difficult to get a view of the whole site because of the hedging on it. This is taken on the eastern edge of the site looking down, so the access would come along here and then up here, and this is the site of the dwelling house would be just here, and the paddock's just behind me. The house you can see down on the left hand side is it's called KIRK House now. I think it used to be called the Cottage. It's on the main road into New Galloway. And this is just to let you see the design of Amboseli, the next house. And there are limited views of the site from public places, but this is one that I did find. It's from the U4, which is just up the West Port, and that's the site. It was kind of difficult to get that out, but the site's in here. That's the hedging you can see. So the proposal is considered to be contrary to policy OP2 and the associated supplementary guidance by virtue of its design and form, and this is discussed in paragraphs 4.7 and 4.8 of the report. The application is recommended for refusal.
Thanks for that, Judith. Questions for officers, members? You go lightly, Judith. Oh no, Jane Maitland and then Patsy.
Just if you can help me with, have I got this right in that this will be set into the hillside and the retaining wall is 2.5 meters high at the back? Is that so? It will be dug right in with a 2.5 meter high retaining wall.
Judith.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, that is the case. If I go back to this slide here, this is the retaining wall here, which is 2.5 meters high. I don't have a section through the site, but there's going to be quite a lot of cut involved in fitting the house into the landscape.
Thanks, Jane. Patsy, and then Stephen Thompson.
Yes, I just want to ask officers about the design, because I can understand that it's not in keeping with perhaps quite a lot of the houses in New Galloway, but next, Amboseli, the design of Amboseli looks quite contemporary. Are you saying that it's not in keeping with Amboseli or New Galloway as a whole?
Judith.
Perhaps we could look at the AMBOSELI House. That looks quite contemporary to me, and you know, and with the designs drawings, that's rather similar. I'm just quite surprised.
You get your response in a minute, Patsy.
The proposal was assessed in relation to the other buildings in the locality, not just AMBOSELI. And I just put that in more just to show an example of what was round about. But it's not been compared entirely to AMBOSELI. It's in keep, you know, whether it was in keeping or not with other buildings in the locality.
Can I just ask when that AMBOSELI was built then? Or is it a conversion of an original? I mean, because it seems.
AMBOSELI, the application for AMBOSELI, I think reserve matters were approved in 2002. So it would be built from maybe started from maybe 3-5 years of 2002.
I just find it strange that, you know, we've approved that one, which is quite modern and contemporary in design, and you're not willing to consider this one, which is equally quite contemporary. It doesn't mean to say I like it, but
it might be a matter of judgment.
Yeah.
Local development plan may have changed, and two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, that basically is the nub of it, is that the LDP, as members will know, was adopted in September 2014, and policy OP2 for the first time actually has a very robust policy seeking improvement in quality of design. And unfortunately, the design here wasn't felt to pass go.
Stephen Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. It's sort of on the back of Councillor Gilroy's query, because there's a number of other houses nearby, so it's just really to get that sense of context according to which it's been compared. Obviously, the finish is another matter, but in terms of the acceptability within the context, you've got Overton House there, which seems to be of a different nature to AMBOSELI, which is in turn different to Scrabo, which is in turn different to, you know, so it was really just to get that sense of context against which it's being compared, even within the new adopted LDP.
Judith?
In relation to the finishes, there wasn't a problem. The finishes were perfectly acceptable. It was the design. And without going into too much detail, what my concerns are on 47 and 40 of the report, and it's really like David said.
Stephen?
Yeah, would it be possible, just on the slides that were shown, there was one which showed the view of the house, which was on the cottage, is it, or the Cruakin, I think you called it. And there was another one which is a sort of overview of it, and it showed various different types of housing looking up to the site as well, from further back, so you got different aspects of the village. Would it be possible just to see those to get a better sense of the visual context?
Sorry, were you just wanting to see the slides again, just to see the context?
Yeah, sorry. So it was just to see, that's the view of the where the road comes into the village, I believe, down, and that's the view down the hill. And there was another one looking up from the other side. So it's just to get a sense of the place from the images that you've supplied. Yeah, thank you. So I think, I mean, that image there kind of shows you there's obviously distinct types, but there's also a range of different types of design and things. So it's just really, I was a bit unclear as to what it was being compared against in terms of the setting.
I think the last thing it was said was it's compared now in the local development plan, which is a very robust set of circumstances for officers to compare it again. And at the end of the day, it's an officer's judgment that you might not agree with. And we can get to that in the determination stage, but the judgment is it doesn't fit with policy, and it's presented to us in that context. Thanks, Stephen. Ian, and then Jim McComb.
Thanks, Jim. Just on the same point, I just what I'm picking up for Judith is that I think she's saying is that she's compared to she's comparing the design standards to the new, what's been approved in the new local development plan rather than just what's in the locale. Is that correct? I think that's what I'm just trying to understand.
Judith?
Yes, the application is not in accordance with policy OP2. That is what I'm saying.
Thanks, Ian. Jim McComan and Andy Ferguson.
Thanks, Chair. I've got a problem as well with 4.7 because it starts off by saying this part of the settlement contains a variety of building forms and there is no particular style which dominates. Then, further down the paragraph, the form of the building itself pays no regard to existing traditional forms. Now, how do you reconcile these two statements?
Judith?
Yes, as pointed out by Councillor Thompson, there are lots of styles in the area. This house is not a traditional form, nor is it present a fully contemporary. Is it successful in presenting a fully contemporary design?
Thanks for that. Andy Ferguson.
Thanks, Chair. It's Councillor McCombs just asked the question I was going to ask.
Okay. Any other questions for Judith at this stage, Patsy?
What would it have to do to produce a contemporary design? What are you expecting?
I hope you're not asking the officer to design it.
No, but if her opinion is that this is not contemporary enough, I'm just not entirely sure how much more contemporary you have to be. And if that's the reason for refusing it, I think we need to know.
Well, I think the problem is...
Sorry, Chair, I'm asking the officer.
No, you're asking me if it's all right to ask the officer. I'm in charge of this meeting at the moment, and what I'm saying is it might be unfair to ask her
Chair,
because...
this is the opportunity to ask the officer for advice, not to ask you for advice, but to ask the
But I
officer
decide
for
whether or
advice.
not the officer responds to that.
I would suggest that perhaps it's up to her.
Yeah, and what I'm saying is I don't want the officer to be designing for her, for any client. It's either fits with her interpretation or it doesn't. Judith? Respond, aye.
That's quite correct, yes. What we do is we assess the proposal, we're not designers.
Any other questions for the officer? Okay, in that case we come to the applicant and the agent, Mr. Fallis and Mr. Lindsay. And again, it's a collective 3 minutes. And I'll remind you with 30 seconds to go.
All right. We do have quite serious contradictions, quite serious concerns about contradictions and errors that are contained within the report, some of which the councillors have just picked up in their debate there. My client has also put down some comments regarding the process that we've had to go through here, but we're going to suspend that to actually address the comments that we've heard so far. We have had concern about the process because we had to withdraw the first application because we were told the design was inappropriate. We could get no more comment from anybody dealing with the application than that. We resubmitted the application trying to best guess what the concerns and the issues were. We made drastic revisions to the roof form, the overall massing of the building itself, even set it in slightly further into the hillside in case that was an issue, which has necessitated further retaining walling have to be done, which we've got an issue with because in the report it says retaining walls at 2.5 metres high, which is not correct. The highest that there'll be is at most 1.8 metres. In the majority of cases, it will be less than that. And it's worth pointing out with regards to context that the councillors have been asking for, even at 2.5 metres, that's less than the retaining walls that are around the property Scrabo, which is the first property you see as you get into the site, and is the one that's actually visible from the street, and it's clearly seen and observed. We've put together the design and the layout on the basis of what is in the immediate vicinity, because that's the context that you'll see this house in. Scrabble is a modern, we can split terms here, modern, contemporary, where's modern, where's contemporary, but it's certainly a modern design because it too was approved, I think it was 2001, 2002. AMBOSELI 2002, again the design for that took context from what had been approved at Scrabble because it was a clear indication of what was acceptable at that particular time. And with regards to this proposal, it's the occupier of AMBOSELI is seeking to develop this site as well, and it's taken a measure from what was on the other sites too, matching up the external finishes as appear on the other two modern properties which this house would be seen within the context of. We've set it away below Overton, which you can barely glimpse through a gap in the tree belt that separates one site off from the other.
To go, David.
Thank you. We made this site low into the side of Overton to preserve its view. Following comments on the initial application, we amended the design to get round the concerns that other people round about had. We've still got concerns, but they've been addressed. And the Community Council didn't like the first design. We presented them with the second design, went through the process,
conclusion, please?
And they were happy and content that what was being shown was appropriate and satisfactory for the site. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any further questions.
Thanks for that, David. Members, any questions for David? Jean Maitland.
Speaking as someone who lives in a house with a retaining wall of about 1.8 metres, I have to say it's not entirely a comfortable design. Is it? I am confused by that roofscape. I mean, it goes on, and I just wonder why it was chosen in that particular way, because it's a big lump of house on one side, David, and then a lot of roofs. And I just wonder whether there would have been a different way of presenting this. You're talking about making it lower, but if it had used the hill, would it not have been possible to make it lower using the topography of the landscape rather than digging in and then getting that retaining wall?
David?
Not as such, because the nature of the slope that we're having to deal with is going basically from south up to north. And the concerns you've got about, it's an amalgamation of a two-storey element and a single-storey element, and that's running east-west, which is relatively level. There's not as great a pronounced a slope across the context of it. So if there was splitting of levels, then it was going to be running through the long axis of the property itself. Now, again, because of we went through a pre-application stage here with this application as well. We got comments back raising issues about the design, but, they said that the roofscape was too big, and saying that, but that was a desk exercise. They hadn't been out on site and hadn't observed context. Now, we couldn't get anybody to discuss it with us when we put the application in, so we tried to best guess what was on that situation and presented the application on the basis that at least if the application's in, somebody will go out, have a look at it and give us a more informed opinion about it. Now, we got negative response, both from neighbours round about. The applicant was quite concerned not to aggravate everybody here or anybody at all and trying to work with people. And we got, your design's inappropriate, I can't support it. No further information other than that and suggesting we withdraw it. So the applicant, in trying to get a resolution to it, withdraw the application. We went back, still couldn't get any input, so we're trying to best case what the situation is here. The retaining walls are as deep as they are because we have tried to hunker it down into the landscape. Maybe during consultation, it might have been the case that that wasn't a really big issue. We could have raised it up so the retaining walls were less. It was just trying to protect the amenity of the house, Overton, which is immediately at the back and is at a higher level. Now, it only has an aspect through a narrow gap within the trees, and they would probably be able to see part of this. So this is why we were trying to be considerate to that and set it slightly lower. There is a fair degree of confusion about the roofscape Fine, it's not simple, it's not straightforward. But again, if we were allowed to put a slightly steeper pitch on, it might have smoothed out some of the issues or angles in that. But again, there are a lot. Okay, and this is the sort of thing. You know, Overton House itself nearby has got an at the back there has got an amalgamation of roofs. 2-storey dormer insertions, 1.5-storey additions at the back, etc., etc. And there's a lot of properties there.
David, can you condense it, please?
Sorry. I'll shut up, I think.
Jane, are you happy with that? Okay.
Yes, I did think there was
Gail.
an answer. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Just a very brief question and hopefully a very brief answer. In respect of the finish of the house, how is it going to relate to Amboselli? What will it look like in comparison? Will it be finished in a similar colour, shape, form?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is identical by way of colour and texture of render, and the use of the facing brick, etc., is replicated on both Amboselli and Scrabble. Similar roof products as well. The only difference here, we've got photovoltaic cells on the roof, but that's a standard requirement of building control these days that are wanting you to provide these sorts of things. So again, it shouldn't be a detraction, it's just part of the overall scheme. We're trying to create a house here that's got minimum impact and is fully compliant with the building regulations. And we're just showing it up front from the outset.
Thanks, David. Any other questions for the applicant or agent? Peter?
David, very briefly, I'm getting the advice from you that you're saying that our planning department have been less than helpful on this occasion, and it's they're not objecting to it because of the site.
Peter, I'd rather David didn't answer that, because we're not here to make accusations about what planning staff do. They have a requirement and a duty to discharge.
Right.
Just because David's not happy with it doesn't mean to say that it's right. I mean, that's a matter for elsewhere.
To answer that,
On
Chair,
that, David, you're no.
Just on the basis
No.
we are not making accusations. The client is most insistent here, is not wanting it singled or identified to individual
David,
parties.
you're a guest here. Peter.
Sorry, Chair, I haven't actually asked a question yet. My question is, were you able to talk to the planning officer and submit various different types of designs and one thing or another for her, for her opinion?
David, the other David will address that before David responds, because we're getting complicated here, and what I don't want to find is us in a position where we're challenging what our staff do in the execution of their duty. David.
Thank you, Chair. Basically, there is, if Mr. Fallis is unhappy about the way things are handled, he knows full well there is a complaints procedure that can be followed. That's not something which the Planning Applications Committee can consider today.
And I'd be happy if we didn't explore that route in future, because every member of this committee should know how to conduct themselves and making allegations. Know that you're doing that isn't a part of that. So does anybody else have any questions on planning matters for the applicant or his agent? In that case, thanks very much for your time, gentlemen. Return to your seat, and we're now in session. Members? Jane.
Well, I think the whole thing's very unfortunate, actually, because it sounds to me as if the applicant has done his best to comply with all sorts of people and all sorts of opinions, and the result is we have a house designed by committee with all the problems that come with it. I've looked at this really quite carefully. I remember AMBOSELI and SCRABO being agreed through the Statutory Area Committee, and they were very modern at the time. I remember everybody getting a little bit wobbly at that stage as to just exactly what they were doing up there. But nevertheless, that was what was agreed through policies at that point. Policies we've got now are tighter. We have guidance, and I would suggest strongly that we've actually got the right decision here, the right recommendation here, albeit I feel great sympathy with the applicant. I think he's probably tried extremely hard, but I think this is not the right building for this particular application site. So I would agree with the recommendations.
And are you proposing that we accept the recommendation? Thank you. Do we have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Dryborough. Do we have any alternative proposals? Ivor?
Chair, I take a different view. it's quite evident from the recommendation that, according to the officer, it doesn't meet with the local built forms, yet it quite clearly states that there is no particular style which dominates. Therefore, I would move that we approve this on the grounds that it is a varied landscape of houses in that area and that this should be accepted.
In terms of governance, is that a sound amendment, Gillian?
Perhaps David could comment on that.
If I'm picking up what you're saying correctly, is that you would wish to approve it as an exception to policy on the basis of the context and the other adjacent houses and the lack of a single, you big word, homogeneous house style in the locality.
Do we have a seconder for that? Gail? Okay, we'll go to the vote. Gillian, please remind members what the vote is, please.
Thank you, Chair. We have a motion by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor Dryborough, to refuse as detailed in the report, and we have an amendment by Councillor Hislop, seconded by Councillor McGregor, to approve the application as exception to policy in the context of other adjacent houses. Councillor Dempster?
Motion.
Councillor Blake?
Amendment.
Councillor Carruthers?
An amendment.
Councillor Diggle? Councillor Dryborough?
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson?
Amendment.
Councillor Geddes?
Amendment.
Councillor Gilroy? Councillor Groom?
Amendment.
Councillor Hislop?
Amendment.
Councillor McGregor?
Amendment.
Councillor Maitland?
Motion.
Councillor McCaughtry?
Amendment.
Councillor McComb?
Amendment.
Councillor McKee?
Motion.
Councillor Syme? Councillor Thompson?
Amendment.
Councillor Witts?
Amendment.
With 5 votes to the motion and 13 to the amendment, the application has been approved as exception to policy, subject in the context of other adjacent houses, and I'm assuming that that will be subject to standard planning conditions. Thank you.
Okay, members happy with that? Members, I have a question for you. It's 1:45. We have only one other registered speaker, and to save that person hanging about for half an hour, would you agree to moving item 8 forward, a deal with that, and then have a recess? Okay, thanks very much, members. That me back in your good books, Tom? Okay, members, we come to item 8. Erection of dwelling house at garden ground of MAHAME, AULDGIRTH. Application type is planning permission in principle. The recommendation is approved subject to conditions. Case officer Lindsay Cameron, and the reference is 15/B/30376. Lindsay, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, this first photograph, first slide, sorry, shows the location of the application site towards the western edge of Burn Head. It lies to the south of the public road, where it sits between the dwellings of MAHAME and Merrington. This is a site plan, and it shows the relationship of the site to the surrounding properties. This first photograph is taken from the existing lay-by on the public road as you approach the site from the east. Merrington, which lies to the west of the site, is the dwelling in the centre of the photo, with MAHAME just to the left out of shot. moving along to the front of the site, this photograph looks in a southerly direction towards the site, which lies between the fence in the foreground and the bushes in the background of the photo. Panning round to the left, this is MAHAME, and the access to the site would be just behind the car where the existing access to MAHAME is located. This photograph looks in a southerly direction across the application site, with Merrington just to the right-hand side of the photograph. And moving round a little, this final photograph is taken from the northeast corner of the site, looking west towards Merrington. The proposals are considered to be in accordance with the development plan, and therefore the application is recommended for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report.
Thanks, Lindsay. Any members have any questions for the case officer? Patsy?
It's on 3.1a, which says the original site was not designated for 4 houses. What kind of changed there, Lindsay?
Lindsay?
Okay, that was one of the grounds for objection, which was raised by one of the representatives, that the site hasn't been allocated for housing in the past. It's not been a settlement and has only recently been identified as a small building group, so I'm not quite sure just exactly where that statement has come from.
Sorry, right, Patsy. Any other questions for the case officer? In that case, can we have Mr. Stuart Robertson, please? And when you come forward, Mr. Robertson, I'll give you 3 minutes and remind you with 30 seconds to go to bring your presentation to a conclusion, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think I'll need 3 minutes, but I only wish to express my concern with regard to 3 points relevant to the applicant. The first one is road safety. It's unfortunate that Lindsay didn't put a photograph in from the other direction, coming along the road from Dunsker and Through into Burnhead, because that's the area which comes round the corner and causes problems. It's probably you're probably able to show by statistics that there are no accidents in that bend, but believe you me, I've lived there for several years, and it's an accident waiting to happen, coming from the other end. The second objection I have, it's not really an objection in a sense. The plan is to site a house in the space accessible. It will certainly lead to loss of privacy as far as both houses are concerned, both MAHAME and Merrington. And I consider it an overdevelopment of the site. It has been on the market for many, many years. There is a controversy over whether, in fact, the planning application in the first place, what it was for. But there have been actually applications made in Burnhead over the last 4, 5, 6 years, which have been turned down by this committee on lesser grounds. Anyway, the third item is that the site is very small. It's only 440 odd. You've seen the papers, obviously. It's a very small site. And to put a building on that site designed compatible with the other 3 houses which are on the site, I don't think is possible. And these are my comments. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to express my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Robertson. Would you mind just a minute in case any member has a question for you? Any members have any question for Mr. Robertson, the objector? In that case, thank you very much for your time, sir.
Thank you very much.
Members are in session. Gail?
All right, it's just to go back to the slide of one that shows the site itself. That would do, that one would be fine. Within the proposals, how close would one side of the proposed development be to the property on the right-hand side of it? I see that there's windows there and a fence line. What's the distance between each house?
Lindsay?
I don't have exact distances, but I think Merrington's approximately 5 metres from the boundary.
Okay. Does that help, Patsy?
Chair, thank you. Just when we've got that slide up, I do have certain sympathy with what Mr. Robertson's saying. It does look like a bit of an overdevelopment of the site. It doesn't seem to be a lot of room. And that's been one of the main concerns with the Community Council, as well as the representatives. And I just wondered what... No, I just think it looks like we're pushing something into a small area, and I wonder why we're doing that.
Lindsay, you might want to respond to that, but I take it there will be an 18-metre window-to-window minimum distance between the proposed development, otherwise it should be stated in the papers.
The current application is obviously an application for planning permission in principle, and therefore we don't have any details of any proposed dwelling. The matters that you raise, the concerns you raise are covered in paragraph 4.6 of the report. We do recognise that it's quite a small site in relation to surrounding properties, and there is the potential for overdevelopment and loss of privacy. However, there is, or there was a previous appeal decision in relation to this, an identical proposal in 2004. The feeling was that given there's been no change in circumstances, no other development which might adversely impact upon the site, and the current development plan policies are not materially different to those policies that it was assessed against previously, that despite these concerns, we didn't feel that there was sufficient grounds to go against that previous decision.
Thanks, Patsy. I've got Jack Groom, then I've got Jane Maitland, then I've got Archie Driver and Stephen Thompson.
Thank you, Chairman. Would this meet the minimum glass to glass, 80 metres glass to glass?
I think that's the thing that I'm omitted to say. It's only in principle, so there is no application yet. That would be dealt with at the time it was submitted. It's just a thing in principle. Jack Salver looked at as well.
Yeah.
There is no detail. Jane Maitland.
I'm slightly sort of bemused. So are we saying that despite the fact that our policies are not substantially different to when we refused it in 2004 on the basis that it was overdevelopment, I think it says here, that it should still go forward? I mean, what has happened is that a reporter decided that we were wrong, but we still have our same policies, which we have decided through quite recently, actually, through public discussion. And we might, well, quite legitimately take the same view as we did last time round. I'm not saying we will, but we could. So I'm slightly curious as to why we have rolled over.
I would have to say I support the view that we should decide, but I'll ask David to respond to the point you've raised.
Indeed, it's open to members of the committee to take the same decision effectively as they had in the past. We've obviously looked at the decision that the reporter made, and we have to give that considerable weight, that now gives a planning history of approval on exactly the same site with the same circumstances, which means that in the event of a refusal, the chances of a reporter doing exactly the same is quite high. And therefore, it does give a material weight to the fact that we have our policy, yes, but the reporter clearly was of the view that at that stage it didn't prove insurmountable, in his opinion, to be able to get a house on that site.
Thanks, Jane. I've got now Archie Driver, Stephen Thompson, then Tom McCall.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, obviously this is planning in principle, and in the past we've made a decision, perhaps a way to move this particular application forward is, as the recommendation is to approve, that we do so. However, any full application can come back in the future, and that way we can actually make that consideration then when we have the full application.
Thanks for that. I'll come back to you in a wee while, Archie. Stephen?
Archie's psychic skills are high today, and that's exactly, I would go along with that and move that we go with the recommendations with it coming back here.
We're provided that it comes back to this committee, okay? Is that a motion and a seconder then?
I'm happy if people are willing to go against it, there will be a motion.
Tom's still to speak, but if you can speak a motion at any time. Tom?
Yeah, I just want a bit of clarity here that obviously it's in principle. Now, if we were to refuse and it went to the reporter, would the reporter just grant it in principle, or would he put conditions on, or what's just a wee bit of clarity in that?
Unless there's a specific process the reporter applies, that might be his or her discretion. David?
Yes, if the application were to be refused and it went to appeal, the reporter would only be able to consider the application that had been before yourselves. So it would be a planning application in principle only. If the reporter was minded to approve it, then it would be open to them to attach what conditions they felt were relevant. There obviously is some, with a planning permission in principle, there are certain standard conditions you must use in terms of whatever details you're looking for to be submitted at what's called an application for matters specified in conditions. So any planning permission principle has to have a number of conditions to it. Whether you wanted to add more or less to that, that's the reporter's discretion.
Tom?
Yeah, I'm grateful for that, because I can see the trap here that if we refuse this, it's then out of our hands. So I think in this case, I'd be happy to support it in the knowledge it's got to come back here for detail, and at that stage, it can be refused on the terms of, on different grounds, because we're all looking at the principle of building, but if we don't like what's proposed, we can refuse it at that stage.
Thanks, Tom. Alistair?
I have no problems at all, sir, with the recommendations in the case officer's report. One observation I would make, with your leave, Chair, though, is that not for the first time today in these papers, paragraph 4.8, Scottish Water has not provided a response in respect of the current application. Now, as far as I'm concerned, that's simply not good enough. And unless there's a clear and compelling reason, as to why that should be the case, I think this council, as planning authority, should make it clear in the strongest possible terms that we're entitled to a level of service, we're not getting it, and they jolly well better, and that's really the words that come to mind, knowing me well enough, I think, that they had rather upped their game, because this is not the only time. It's not a planning issue, but this is not the only difficulty that some of us, and I'm looking at Jim McCollum in a mid-Galloway context, are having with this particular organisation, Chair. And really, enough is enough. They're consultees. They're obliged to respond, is my understanding. And if they're not doing that, we should be making it clear that we're not prepared to accept that. Thank you.
I take it you'd be content if David passes that observation to Alistair Speedy to deal with in committee's behalf.
Would be delighted, sir, if that's the feeling of the committee.
If members are happy with that. I think the other thing, though, is it's normal, as far as I understand, that when Scottish utilities, when Scottish Water doesn't respond, we assume that it'll be an approval because they haven't taken the trouble to respond to us. Andy?
Thanks, Chair. I would actually widen that, because all the statutory consultees should at least have the decency to actually respond. Right? Even if it's we have no comment to make, they should be responding if they're statutory consultees, and I think that's the message we need to send out.
I'm happy, if members are happy with that, I'm happy with that. We'll ensure that David takes that message to Alistair Speedy on our behalf. Okay, so we now have a proposal and a seconder that we approve this in principle with a requirement that this particular application, if it ever comes to fruition, comes back to this committee for consideration, and that way it provides a kind of protection for the council rather than allowing a reporter to determine what the application is. Ian Carruthers?
Chairman, so when you're being that specific, are we talking about reserve matters and conditions? Because there's conditions already embodied within the report. Does that mean any reserve matters has to come back to this, like site design, window to window, distances, so on and so forth?
I'll let David reply to that.
Yes, my understanding is what you're basically saying is that any future application, be it either a detailed planning application or the technical term for it is an application for matters specified in conditions, which basically means today you'll be establishing the principle of it, but you can't carry out development unless you've submitted the application or applications for all other details which are set out on page 70.
And hopefully that will include a response to Scottish Water. Are there any alternative proposals to that proposal from Archie? In that case, it's a unanimous decision. Can you advise the committee decision, Gillian, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the application has been approved subject to the conditions and on the condition that any further application will come back to this committee. Thank you.
Thanks very much, members. If you're happy now, we'll have a comfort break and come back at 25 to 2. Indulgence and welcome back to the afternoon session. If we can refer back to item 7, but we skipped it just prior to the recess. Item 7, installation of 8 10-metre high floodlighting columns, erection of 2.75 metre chain link fence and resurfacing of tennis courts at BEECHGROVE Tennis Club, Edinburgh Road, MOFFAT. Application type is full plan permission. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. Case officer Andrew Robinson, and the reference is 15/P/4/0223. Andrew, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Yes, the application effectively relates to upgrading works at a tennis club in MOFFAT. This is the application site. It's a triangular shaped site which is situated on the northeastern side of Edinburgh Road, and which is at the southern side of the site, and BEECHGROVE, which is to the east of the site. And what the proposal entails is effectively 8 floodlighting columns on what are 3 of the lower tennis courts. So effectively, in this part of the site, will be 8 floodlighting columns. Each tennis court will be surrounded by an improved fencing with 2.75 metres in height, and there'll be some resurfacing works as well to the tennis courts. So in terms of the floodlight columns, these are those, they're actually 10 metres in height. This is a floodlighting spillage plan that's been submitted, and there was additional information submitted throughout the course of this application due to responses from representations, and it actually shows the lighting levels to properties on BEECHGROVE, just along here, just to ensure that no adverse light pollution would occur to these properties. This is the fencing. It's 2.75 metre high standard mesh fencing for the courts. And this is the site as you go into it from the corner, in the southeastern corner. So there's 3 tennis courts all in a line at the upper end of the site, adjacent to BEECHGROVE, and then it's the 3 lower courts. So these courts here, so there's the 2 there, and there's one just in the foreground, the background, that's where the floodlighting columns would be positioned. Again, looking across, that's the properties at on BEECHGROVE, which look over to the site. And this is the view from the road from those properties. And this is from Edinburgh Road, so the properties itself there. There's quite heavy screening around that part of the site. So, in conclusion, officers consider this proposal is acceptable subject to conditions in the report.
Questions for officers, and I've got Gail, and I've got Stephen, and I've got Peter.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to see that they've amended the application slightly, just that they're taking it down from 2 kilowatts to 1 kilowatt. I'm assuming that they're LED lights, and they'll likely be pointing sort of down and over the courts rather than up and towards the houses, and the fact that it's only on the 3 bottom ones as well. But I mean, it's a hugely positive development, this, and great for the community. So I hope it will get support, but just some clarification on those points.
Thanks, Gail. Andrew, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, there's actually condition 2 refers exactly to that point you made. Effectively, it's a condition that the proposed lighting has been considered acceptable, but also that they shall be directed not towards adjacent properties, effectively, so that light spillage does not go above the horizontal. And as well, the lower site level does help with that as well.
Okay, Gail. Stephen and then Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just a question on the actual operation of the lighting. I know there's a condition there that it should be off by 10 p.m. at night. Just in terms of the lighting of each court, I know we're sort of very energy conscious now, and to reduce excessive lighting, can we not ensure that like the whole thing doesn't have to be lit if one court's in use, so that in the same way as you've gone to one room, you just switch the light for that room on? Can we do the same thing with each tennis court?
Andrew?
That point was raised in a representation, actually, and I did consider that, and in paragraph 4.14 explains why, whilst that is in theory a good idea, I don't think to stipulate something like that would actually be enforceable. It would be very difficult for the planning authority to monitor that. So whilst in theory it's a sensible and practical suggestion, I don't think as a planning authority we could enforce that. It's effectively an operational matter for the council of how, if we were to receive a complaint, say, oh, there's 2 courts lit up, how we would then monitor and enforce that at that particular moment in time. So then that's the question on that is, does it meet the requirements of Circular 498 for attaching conditions? And it was considered that it would actually fail to meet that requirement. So that's why we didn't consider it necessary to put it on.
Thanks, Stephen. Peter?
Thank you. Yeah, I was looking at the light switches as well, Stephen. But it's going to be difficult because they're going to be sharing courts. The lights are going to be on different courts. I suppose they could isolate the 2 most southern ones. But anyway, I agree with you. Just on the condition on colour, I was just wondering whether you could give us an example of what would be acceptable and what wouldn't be acceptable.
Andrew?
Without wanting to prejudge what they submit in terms of the colour, because the surfacing of the tennis courts can come in certain colours. I think with it being in the conservation area, we want to avoid a particularly powerful colour, something more receptive. They can come in a range of from blue to green or dark red. I mean, so we would have to see, and that's why we considered it appropriate to do that by condition, to make sure that the colour of the courts isn't, particularly with properties overlooking that site, to make sure that it doesn't adversely affect the character of the area.
Thanks, Peter. If there are no other questions for the case officer, we're now in session. Members, Archie?
Agree the recommendations, Chair.
Any alternative view? In that case, unanimous. Gillian, can you confirm the decision of the committee, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the application has been approved, subject to the conditions as detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. We go to item 9 on the papers. Continued use of temporary access without compliance with condition 1 attached to planning permission 13/P/3/0305. Condition limiting use of temporary access for a period of 2 years to extend use until 30th of June 2016 at TERREGLES Road, Dumfries. The application types full planning permission. The recommendation is approved subject to conditions. And the case officer is Claire Eckstein. Reference number 15/P/3/0282. Claire, will you take members through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. The site lies on the western side of Dumfries, on the northern side of the C14 TERREGLES Road. Showing it there. And the application is for the continuance of the temporary access that was created on TERREGLES Road with the building of the housing estate at Barnhill, the final phase, which is known as Burns Green. And this just shows the emergency vehicle access, which has been approved onto TERREGLES Road following the closure of the temporary access, and that will sort of remain in place. And obviously the layout plan for the final phase, which was approved under two separate applications noted in the screen. So this is looking into the existing vehicle access into the site from Dumfries from the eastern side. As you can see, there's a lot of sort of site vehicles that have been using it as their car park. And again, from the west side, and this is just a close-up, actually showing the vehicle access itself. You can see the sort of foundations of the sort of last houses being built just to the rear of the sort of silver car. And again, that's sort of panning right from the previous photograph. The proposal is, as this report sets out, it's just to extend this temporary access, which is given temporary permission till June 2016, which is when Persimmon expect to be off the site, and then obviously it will get restored to the emergency vehicle access. So the proposal, the recommendation is to approve the application subject to condition noted in the report.
Thanks, Claire. Questions for the case officer for members? If there are none, can we go to the recommendation? Councillor McKee.
Sorry, I didn't realise you were saying we were in session 2. It's just that access, can we ensure that the hedges are replaced to the width of the road, and it's not left to them to decide how they're going to leave it, because in all probability they'd leave it like that, and the access would be gated off or whatever the intention is. But want that tidied up to the condition or to the state it was in prior to that opening being made. The hedges should be replaced.
Does that already form part of the conditions, Claire, or is that something we require to add if members want to agree to it?
If you look at the condition, the actual restoration has already been agreed as part of the previous approvals. Obviously, the original appeal for the application and the subsequent amendment of house types. So that's already approved, and the actual EVA itself will obviously be smaller than that access shown there. It will be I've just, because I obviously can't read it at that point there, but it's a grasscrete permeable surfacing access path, which will be 3.7 metres wide, with 2 collapsible bollards at either end of the new road to create the connection between onto Terregles Road. Stop, obviously, traffic getting backwards and forwards onto the site.
That's fine. Just to tidy up the either side of the edges. But I remember this application, it was the reporter who overruled this, and the reporter was left to get on with it, and he might have left the finishing not suitable to us, so just in case. Thanks very much.
Okay, so we're in session. Are members, Archie?
Just agree the recommendation. Yeah.
Unanimous? Thank you, members. Okay, we come to agenda item. Oh, Gillian, you're going to tell us what the decision is.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that the application has been approved subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. Come to item 10. Change of use of open space for extension to south elevation of Harbour Master's office at Harbour Master's office, Harbour Square, Kirkcudbright. The application type is full planning permission. Recommendations approved subject to conditions. Case officer is Claire KIRK. Reference number is 15/B/2/0275. David, are you doing it for Claire?
Yes, I'm doing it. Thanks, Chair. Members may recall this actually was at your September committee, and I'll scroll through the slides quickly because there was really only one issue which resulted in the application being refused. That's the existing building. You can see there's an area of open space there which would be incorporated into the extension. And the extension itself is for a substation, which there's been a number of options looked at for where that could be sited, but this was regarded as the best option, was actually incorporating it within the building, and that substation would then be able to power ships in the harbour. So, just scrolling through them again quickly. That's the area of open space shown in the audit, so it is recognised as an area of open space. And that's just showing where the substation would sit onto that gable. Existing elevations and proposed elevations, critically the change which has occurred, and there is a slide later on which shows you the difference. This was the elevation, and there was before a wall that came along and ran down, which was just solid, and members felt that would an unsatisfactory detail that could just result in antisocial behaviour with people hiding behind it, etc. So that has been revised where they've brought it right down, and you can see in this slide here, it now just comes straight down and goes down with a handrail rather than the wall which came in. In fairness to the architect section, what they were trying to do was copy what's on the other side of the building, which is like that. But nonetheless, they've taken on board these concerns. This shows you a very clear contrast. That was the previous application which was refused, and you can see that has now just been made a lot simpler line that comes down with just a handrail running down here. So we're satisfied. We recommended approval last time, obviously. The one issue which members refused it on, I'm satisfied has been properly addressed. So the recommendation is to approve.
Thanks, David. Members, questions for the case officer? Okay, members, we're in session. Approved? Unanimous? Okay, thank you, members. Come to item 11, 12 and 13 will do individually, but they're all... Gillian, it's your turn.
Thank you. Just to confirm that the application item number 10 has been approved subject to the conditions as detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. Items 11, 12 and 13 are all SBEN applications, but they don't relate to the activity that's being engaged in by the community in relation to direction. This is another type of application altogether. Robert might just want to briefly touch on that, and then we'll do item 11, then we'll do item 12, then we'll do item 13. So item 11 is formation of quarry and associated works at Whitehall Quarry, north of CARSPHAIRN. Stephen.
And item 14. And item 14, I think, as well.
Item 14 as well. Yeah, well. Application type, full planning permission. The recommendation approved subject to conditions. The case officer, Dean Clapper, there. Robert's taking this report. Reference number is 15/P/20136. Robert, would you just clarify the SBN situation and then take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to do that. The case officer is having an enjoyable holiday at the moment, which is why I'm appearing today. So, as you point out, Chair, there are 4 applications that are before you today. All are in connection with what's known as the South West Scotland Renewables Connection project. This isn't to be confused with the present consultation by SPEN regarding power lines strategically across the region. This was something that came before members a couple of years ago. It was granted a separate Section 37 consent from the Scottish Government. Just to clarify, the works proposed a new substation at New Cumnock. It involved works within South Ayrshire, East Ayrshire and Dumfries and Galloway as an area. Works are due to start in late 2015, going forward to 2016 as an overall project. So it involves a new overhead line between New Cumnock substation and the new substation planned at Black Hill, which is in the Stewartry area, as well as a new substation at Glenglass at the head of the Oaken Valley to the west of Sanquhar, and that would connect to the Black Hill substation via an overhead line. So that's what's been granted. These applications all relate to that project. It's to support the implementation of that development. Moving to the first one, which is Whitehill Quarry. First slide, obviously it's within a forested land, forestry plantation. This is a view up the hill towards the existing borrow pit that's located on the site. And then you've got the existing borrow pit there. Now when I run through the plans, it will become more obvious how the layout works. Coming back to the South West Scotland project, I mean, again, what you're looking at from left to right in the red lines, you're looking at Brownhill Rig. You've got Mid Hill on the right-hand side. You've got Gallow Rig is the central red circle. And then you've got Whitehill as well as Black Hill in the blue. So that gives you an idea of the overall, if you like, situation of quarries. Looking at the location plan, I mentioned the existing borrow pit. You can see that on the top left-hand side. If it's helpful, the picture that was taken looking up the track was taken about here. So the application site's on the left-hand side as you look at this. That shows greater detail of the proposed excavations, and it gives you a cross-section too. So what you're looking at is the dotted line being existing levels, these being proposed levels post-excavation. So it's kind of benching type approach, if you like. And again, you've got a cross-section there in a longitudinal direction showing existing and proposed levels. That's an aerial photograph. Sometimes it brings out the terrain and the ground cover a bit better when you've got something like this to see how it sits at the moment. So as I say, it's a forestry plantation area. You can see that area has been fairly recently felled and replanted, and you've got more mature forestry around here as well. Associated with this, and again, similar to all the projects, you've got a proposed mess room, which is essentially a glorified porta cabin to cater for site operatives. You've got an office elevation for each proposed site as well, and storage container elevations, which again are consistent across each project. Restoration intentions doesn't show up particularly well here, but those have been submitted in connection with the application, and they're proposed there. Looking at it generally, I'm not going to reiterate what's in the report, but you've got project description, section 1.4, description of the operations at 1.5, the background to the application, which I've partly covered, is at 1.7, and there's also a supporting transport statement that has been submitted to cover that, as well as at 4.27 in the report. There is the access and transport summary, which gives vehicle numbers and types and so on. The main objective, the reason for having these quarry operations close to the route of power lines and so on, is simply to try and reduce the number of vehicle movements to the public road network. There will be some, and I've got the transport statements here, but they're very limited. In other words, once the site operatives and the machinery are out on site, there's really very little traffic associated with these proposals. We've also obviously consulted the Council's roads engineers on that aspect of it as well, and considered the kind of visual environmental impacts of it as well. So in summary, with regard to the first item 11, the recommendations for approval subject to the conditions listed.
Any questions for the case officer from members? No, Jim?
Thanks, Chair. Page 98, the section on the planning obligation. Could you explain, please, Robert, why a restoration bond is not considered necessary?
Robert?
It's a fairly short-term project, if you like. You know, we're not talking like a wind farm, something that's going to last 25 years. So in recognition of the kind of scale of the scheme, the fact you're not talking about a long time, and the fact that we clearly know who the operator is going to be, it's going to be Scottish Power Energy Networks in this case. It's their obligation to do it. So we've got certainty about that element of it, such that we feel that a bond's not necessary. It would add extra processing time. We feel a condition's probably robust enough in these circumstances to make sure we get proper restoration.
Jim?
So there would be absolutely nothing to stop the Forestry Commission operating this borrow pit once the land reverts back to them. Is that correct?
Robert?
They would need to adhere to the terms of the planning permission, but yeah, I suppose if the Forestry Commission wanted to operate this as a quarry thereafter, as long as they were operating it in terms of the planning permission, they could do that. At the moment, you tend to find borrow pits for forestry operations are normally permitted development anyway and don't require planning permission.
I think the unfortunate thing is, and we've discussed this a number of occasions here, a borrow pit's probably the wrong name for it because they're not got to put the stuff back. Anyway, Stephen.
Yeah, thank you. It's just a quick question on the treatment lagoons as referenced by SEPA in their response. I know, I appreciate there's a condition, but that's more really relating to the private water supply for one of the nearby dwellings. So I was just, I mean, are we satisfied within the report that the appropriate clean-up operation after operations is being accounted for? And maybe you could highlight that in the report, because I couldn't quite get the clarity on that. Thank you.
Steve, Robert?
It's really something that's covered in the conditions. For example, in condition 5, when it says no extraction, that obviously means extraction of any minerals, unless an ecological management and mitigation plan has been submitted to and approved in writing by the Council's Planning Authority in consultation with SEPA. So the idea is to keep them on board by means of that. You've also got in condition 3 requirement for a restoration and aftercare scheme as well, and that would include proposed surface water management and so on, aftercare, phasing of the restoration, all these kinds of things. So yeah, it's quite specialised input we get from SEPA, so in discharging those conditions we'd make sure we consulted with them.
Thanks, Stephen. David McKay.
You were on about the length of time this run. Now, condition 1 says no later than 36 months from a date of commencement of development that the site will be discontinued by that date. But you were saying the Forestry Commission can continue to do that. Would they need to apply for permission and under that?
Robert?
Well, the point I'd made was the Forestry Commission could still extract minerals from the site, provided they were in accordance with the terms of the planning permission. So if the planning permission is issued with condition 1 in place, they've got a limited time period.
Okay, if there are no other questions for the case, Alistair.
Bearing in mind that we hear from time to time, and my understanding, Chair, is at the moment that there's a debate ongoing about the future of the Forestry Commission. What's the likelihood, in fact, of at the end of this period of the situation having been radically altered? The period of 3 years, and in relation to the existence of the Forestry Commission. I must admit, going over these papers, I marked it up, and like Jim, I'm uneasy about this, Chair. I'm not suggesting for one moment that we put conditions in, to be unjustifiable or merely for the sake of it. But my basic instinct says, well, we're maybe being a wee bit, we're maybe letting them away with a wee bit in this particular instance. Incidentally, can I also have confirmation, Chair, on paragraph 4.32, when we're talking about the robust remediation condition, and it says condition 4 below. Now, condition 4, as I understand it, relates primarily to the appointment of a suitably qualified environmental clerk of works. So should that maybe no be condition 3, Chair?
Robert?
Chair, yes, I accept that point and apologise for that. That's a type of mistake in the report. It should be condition 3, yes.
The really important point I'm raising, sir, is, as I've already indicated.
Well, we'll maybe at the very end come back and see if we can just tidy up the conditions and what we are actually looking to achieve from this, if you're all right with that, Alistair. Other members, do you have any other questions for the case officer? In that case, we're in session, and I'm going to come back to Alistair last. Does anybody else have anything they want to introduce? Alistair, do you want to come back again with the points you're raising?
Well, it was just, as I've said, Chair, having gone over the papers, I flagged it up. Interesting to hear colleagues, Jim in particular, raising it. As I say, I have a certain amount of unease about the fact that, LDP policy ED 15, gives us the right, to sort of secure an appropriate planning obligation, via a restoration bond. And I do take the point that's been made that things stand as things stand at the moment. It's probably justified, but what happens in fact if there is a radical alteration or change, for instance, in perhaps the locus of role of such as the Forestry Commission between now and the end of the 3-year period? Could we be left, sort of prejudiced as a consequence of that?
I'll get David maybe to try and help you, Alistair.
Thanks, Chair. It's fair to say when I read through the reports, that was actually the thing I picked up on as well. But we looked at the issue of a bond, but it was a case of proportionality and whether or not this, a risk assessment effectively, as to whether or not it was necessary. To answer your question, condition 2 would really restrict it to being in accordance with the proposed plan. So if there was any material change, if somebody else, Forestry Commission or otherwise, was taking this on, proposing to do something different to what was set out in the proposals, that would immediately require a new application.
You comfortable with that, Alistair?
Yes, indeed, and that, on the basis of that explanation, it would be good, perhaps, Chair, if we could get that incorporated in some way or another into the minutes of the decision, so that that no one will accuse us of having sleepwalked into this at some time in the future.
Gillian, can you ensure that particular observation is included in the minute of this committee?
Yes, that's no problem.
Thanks, Alistair. Okay. Then members, Jane?
Could I possibly just ask about timings on this? I'm assuming that, I mean, when does extraction happen? Does it happen when somebody plonks a porta cabin down on the site? Or does it happen when you first start digging something out of the ground?
Robert?
Chair, for the avoidance of doubt, we would take extraction to mean the first extraction of minerals from the site. So basically the first kind of spade or shovel fall, if you like.
So it could be 2 years from now when they start, and so that's with 5 years from now before the thing's completed, aye. Everybody happy with that? Okay, do we just go with the recommendation then? Unanimous? Gillian, can you advise members of the decision taken, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to confirm that this application has been approved subject to the conditions as detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. We come to item 12, formation of quarry and direction of offices in mess room, siting of storage container and associated works at Galloway Quarry, 2.35 kilometres west of Afton Reservoir, CARSPHAIRN Forest. Application type is full planning permission. Recommendations approved subject to conditions. Case officer was again Dean Clapworthy, although Robert's speaking to it. Reference number is 15/P/2/00151. Robert, will you take us through your presentation for this part of the application, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, certainly. Again, another planning application for quarry area to provide minerals, if you like, in connection with the South West Scotland Renewables project. The different location, I mean, the location plan on page 103 probably shows the site in its wider context best. So you're very close to the East Ayrshire boundary here. You can see Glen Afton Reservoir, just the top right-hand side of the page. And just for clarification, the wind farm just to the kind of south of that is Windy Standard 1, the first Windy Standard project that was built in the mid-1990s. Looking at the photographs, this is actually within the application site and it's looking northwest along the existing forestry track. And this is the view of land on the northern side of that track, so that this makes more sense when I show the pictures. There are existing borrow pit workings to the east of the application site. These are by the Forestry Commission. And you also have the existing Windy Standard substation building, which you see there, which is the reference point for the plans. Again, this is showing the wider context of the proposal. For this one, you're actually, the site, if I can use the pointer, if it's going to work for me. That's it there. We're looking roughly about this location, around about this area. And that for a reference point is the New Cumnock substation. Looking at the location plan for the project, the building that we saw is down there, and the previous borrow pit workings again are down in that location. Proposal is on both sides of the existing track. So looking at it in greater detail, you're looking at the actual proposed extraction area being in the southwestern side of that track that exists. Profiles again are provided, so you're looking at a stepped excavation profile, with that being the existing ground level, longitudinal and cross section. Aerial photograph, again, this really demonstrates characteristics of the site. Again, very heavily afforested. You're looking at a plantation type environment. Again, you've got mess room elevations, essentially a porta cabin, and similarly office elevations and a storage container proposed. Restoration intentions are proposed, and again, this is covered in the report, covering that part on the southwest side of the access track. Again, I'm not going to go through the details, but project descriptions provided at 1.4 in the report, site operations at 1.5, background to the project 1.7, 1.8, and also reference to the supporting transport statement. The objectives are similar, basically to try and extract minerals required closest to the point of need as possible without impacting greatly on the public road network. There is reference in the report at 4.22 to the access and transport situation, as well as consultation response from the Council Roads Officer, and that just gives an indication of vehicle numbers and types involved in the case. The recommendation is to approve subject to conditions listed.
Thanks, Robert. Questions for the case officer? Alistair?
Can we put in the same qualifications, sir, in relation to this one as we did for the previous one at the appropriate time?
And you'd like it recorded in a minute as well? That'd be fine. Okay, members on session? Great. Okie dokie, thank you. Come to plan application number 13. Formation of quarry and direction of offices in mess room, siting of storage container and associated works at Brownhill Rig Quarry, CARSPHAIRN. Application type is full planning permission. Recommendations approved subject to conditions. Case officer in Clapworthy and reference number is 15/P/2/0168. Robert, will you take us through your slides again, please?
Thank you, Chair. Again, the background to this proposal is the same as the ones that I've outlined. Moving to the photographs, first of all, you've got a panorama over the existing borrow pit and plantation area within which it's situated. This is an image looking back up the track from the other end of the site, so this is looking, I think, towards the northwest. Again, that's showing the wider context of the application site. So you can see Brownhill Rig is the westernmost of the proposals you're considering today. Location plan, just for reference, that was the access track pictures were taken from. So the existing workings in the first image were on the left-hand side, so that's in there. Looking back up the track was looking up that way. So again, like I said, to the northwest. When you look at the site plan, it's all proposed to take place on the kind of northeastern side of that access track. So on the left as you first looked at it, and on the right as you looked at the second image. Again, like the others, you've got indicative cross sections showing how it's intended to work it on a kind of step basis, and a longitudinal section as well. That gives you an idea of what's proposed there. Aerial photograph, obviously it's within a forestry plantation, it's a felled area at the moment, and again that shows you existing workings just as a reference point with the track here. Similar proposals with the mess room, the office elevations, the storage container, all these features are proposed with this application too. And restoration intentions, it's covered in the report, summarised there, and that just gives you a plan showing how they intend to restore that site following the finalisation or the end of the project as far as they need it. Again, the recommendation is to approve the application subject to conditions.
Thanks, Robert. Questions for the case officer? None. Into session. Happy to agree with the same proviso that's included in the minutes and the conditions. Thanks, members. We come to item number 14. Formation of quarry and direction of offices and mess room, siting of storage container associated works at Well Hill, west of Sanker. Application type, full planning permission. Recommendation approved subject to conditions. Case officer Dean Clapworthy. Reference number 15/B/3/0191. Robert, will you take us through the slides for this one, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just happy to go through a similar format. Again, for the avoidance of doubt, this proposal is linked to the South West Scotland renewables project. It doesn't link to the present overhead power line proposal. It doesn't link to any of the proposed wind farms in that area, so that's Whiteside Hill, Earlyside, McGuckin Rig. It's not really at all connected with those that are subject to separate applications. We've also got at the moment one application which is to propose to extend an access track from the McGuckin Rig wind farm to the U432N, which is the Yukon Glen Road. That's a separate application, hasn't been determined, as is an application we've got to form an access track next to the U432N public road along part of its length. That's subject to a separate application. So they'll come forward in due course separately for consideration. This is a view from the existing track, looking at this one at Well Hill along the south of the site. It's looking east, and you've got existing borrow pit workings at the moment within the eastern part of the site. That's looking back across, so it's looking west. You can see that you've got part of the track network disappearing into the trees, and the final picture, again, that's the access track going into the trees, is back along the main access track itself, and that's from the edge of the existing worked area. Again, shows you existing location. That's the substation there. So you're looking at Well Hill being located there. So further up, Sanker as a reference point is there. You've got Blackharry Road, and then you've got the Glen access road going up to there. Location plan, again, you can see the existing borrow pit workings there quite clearly. You're looking at a forested site, fairly steeply sloping, so increasing, as you would have seen in the pictures, from south to north. It shows the site plan with the proposed cross sections, and again that demonstrates the topography of the site, the slope, and so on. This aerial photograph just shows characteristics of a wider kind of forestry plantation area. And again, proposed mess room, proposed office, proposed storage container. Restoration intentions are outlined on the plan here as well, and they're obviously considered in the report too. Recommendation is to approve subject to the conditions listed in the report.
Thanks, Robert. Happy with the observations you made at the start of your presentation. Questions for officers? None. John?
Just questioning the authenticity of the photographs, Chair, because it's no raining or snowing in any of them.
Probably right. I should really ask Robert to qualify that. Dean got a good day, aye. Right, members are in session. Agreed? Okay, thank you. You never got to comment on the good weather, Robert.
Sorry, Chair, I didn't take the photographs. That's the problem.
Okay. Maybe we're needing more photographers up if the weather's like every time they appear, John. Hey, item 15. Pardon? No, I'm fed up with it. Gillian, same conditions, please, introduced into the minute, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just to confirm, this application has been approved, subject to conditions detailed in the report.
Just while you're there, actually, Andy.
Just for the tape, did we do that for 13? I think we did.
We didn't. Okay, we'll do it for 13 now, Gillian, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm, the application per item 13 was approved, subject to the conditions detailed in the report.
Thanks, Gillian. Thanks for that, Andy. Maybe I'm needing it today. We come to item 15. Erection of detached dwelling house, installation of septic tank and soakaway and formation of vehicular access at land adjacent to Stone House, Gretna. Application type, full plan permission. Recommendation to refuse. Case Officer Lindsay Cameron. Reference number 15/P/4/0249. Lindsay, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Thank you, Chair. This first slide shows the location of the application site to the northwest of Gretna. This first photograph is taken from the railway bridge just to the north of the A75 as you approach the site from the south. The farmhouse, farm buildings and 2 stone house can be seen in the distance to either side of the public road. Given that one of the key considerations in the assessment of the principle of development in this case is whether there's a small building group in this location, the following slides provide a range of contextual views in the locality. So continuing on the approach to the site from the south, views are generally restricted by the existing mature hedges which bound the public road. On reaching the developed area, the farmhouse and farm buildings can be seen to the east of the road. Continuing towards the site, 2 stone house, which has been recently extended, lies to the west of the road, with further agricultural development to the east. On approaching the site, again, this photograph shows the nature of agricultural development east of the road. And this is a view of development opposite the site. And turning round to the left, this photograph shows the application site, which lies behind the gate and the hedge beyond. And this photograph looks in a southerly direction from the site and again shows the agricultural nature of existing development. And turning round to the left, this is a view from the site to the north. Continuing beyond the site, this photograph looks in a southerly direction towards the application site. As with the approach from the south, views are generally contained by the mature hedge to either side of the public road. This photograph shows 5 Stone House, which lies east of the public road. And panning round to the right, this is a view looking south towards the application site, which lies behind the hedge. Moving into the site, this photo is taken from the southern boundary looking north. And this is the reverse view. This is from the north boundary looking south with 2 Stone House towards the right of the photo and 5 Stone House just to the edge, the left-hand edge of the photo. And this final photograph is a wider view from the north showing the context of the site. Here we have a location plan and the proposed site plan showing the house and the garage and the general layout of the site. These are the proposed elevations, the proposed floor plans, and this final slide shows an aerial view of the site together with a plan which identifies the existing dwellings and the extent of agricultural development in the locality. The proposal fails to comply with the provisions of the relevant development plan policies, and therefore it is recommended that the application is refused for the reasons set out in the report.
Thanks, Lindsay. Questions for officers? Jane.
Could we just go back one slide? I'm sorry, I didn't see what those...
Can you describe what the
Can you describe,
arrangement
yes,
of buildings
please?
are, Lindsay, please?
Yes, the plan on the left-hand side shows the 3 existing dwellings defined in red. The arrows show the orientation of each of the properties, so that the principal elevation in each case. And the area outlined in blue is the extent of the agricultural buildings, which forming part of the farm.
Jane? Fine, okay. Any other members for case officer? Okay, in that case we're in session. Archie?
Thanks very much, Chair. And I know coming from Shanker, you've got to be tolerant, so I hope you'll be tolerant with me on this particular one. I've done quite a bit of study on this, and as it states in the report, the specific proposal raises issues of interpretation on LDB Policy H3 and the recent supplementary guidance on housing in the countryside, which merits consideration for the Planning Committee. And I'm sure members are aware of the many discussions and perhaps disagreements we had with small building groups over the past thing. But the relevant planning history in the report fails to sort of advise of some of the applicants' previous applications. He runs a forestry and agricultural business from that farm and has recently moved that business to the farm opposite the site, and an application was determined 15D40004 for demolition and replacement of the stone buildings for the part of the business and a general purpose barn. Application being agreed by devolved powers under agricultural rights. With regards to the planning and design, and I refer to correspondence in the planning application documents from the agent which states, we were asked by the planning officer to design a 1.5-storey property in this manner, and we have done so. That it is T-shaped does not make it unusual within this location or Dumfries and Galloway in a wider context. Policy H3 states quite clearly that the Council will support housing proposals in the countryside where the proposals meets one or more of the related criteria. And the criteria is in this document here, housing in the countryside. I would suggest that the application fits certainly 3 of the criteria and probably more, in that it is within or well related to a small building group which is either identified on list contained in supplementary guidance or is defined as 3 or more separate habitable or occupied houses, which we see quite clearly in the photograph here, which are well related to each other and which create a sense of place. I would also suggest that as the business has moved into the farm buildings, that is essential for the needs of the business. One of the sons of the owner will stay at the house, which hopefully will be granted. Another of the sons has Down syndrome. Some may remember Sam Patterson, who is a Paralympic Down syndrome swimmer who's got gold in some of the Paralympics that he does. I suggest that the family's needs might not be met by a nearby settlement and try to keep Sam in family. Thirdly, this bill will allow the future retirement of the owner of the agri-forestry business, and of course perhaps not a planning issue, but with the increase in rural crime, perhaps have a sense of security for this business. I would suggest that this application is well related to its landscape setting of an appropriate scale and design to its location, and as part of this planning committee, of course, we cannot underestimate the significant contribution agriculture and forestry business make to Dumfries and Galloway as a whole. And I would suggest this application has shown it would be beneficial to the applicant to have this built. Looking at the guidance and where this application is cited, if we look at page 3 on this guidance here, Chair, the policies and the principles of building in the house, as I said before, has got 3, which I can consider, and of course it's an interpretation of where this actually goes. And I think that because it's a 1.5-storey building, it fits in the small settlement very well and will be sympathetic to the vernacular design. This building will also complement the other buildings in the area. If you look at the plan there, so you're up on the right hand, the top red one is actually owned by a trust for a mental health group, and it cannot be sold. Scottish Planning Policy 2014, which fed into the LDP, and H3 stated that in remote rural areas where new development can often help to sustain fragile communities, planning decision-making should generally encourage sustainable development that will provide employment, support and sustain fragile and dispersed communities through provision for appropriate development, especially housing and community-owned energy. Scottish Planning Policy 23 include provision for small-scale housing and other development which supports sustainable economic growth in ranges of locations, taking account of environmental protection policies and addressing issues of location, access, site and design and environmental impact. Where appropriate, allow the construction of single houses out with the settlements, provided they are well sited and designed to fit the local landscape character, taking account of landscape protection, and not impose occupancy restrictions on housing. Chair, I would like to propose that we would allow this application as an exception to policy, with the conditions agreed by officers and those statutory consultees that have asked for conditions to be applied should this be accepted by members. As I said here, I've took quite a lot of interest in this particular one. I was involved when it was D4, policy D4 and housing in the countryside. H3 has brought us on a little bit. The problem I have is I think that there's potential for officer mixing D4 with H3 here. And again, it's doing the interpretation. At the end of the day, I think the interpretation that I have is I think this would fit in well with the actual group that's in it. I think it will support the business. It will bring employment into the particular area that's in my particular ward. So I mean, I've got but I'm happy to listen to other members in this application, Chair. But I would suggest that we do allow this because of the things I suggest.
To say that was a lengthy presentation, maybe being kind. I'll try and get Lindsay to address some of the points you raised just for members' benefit before I go to other members. Lindsay? Try and be brief.
Okay. In terms of H3, the only part of the policy that has the potential to apply is the first part in relation to small building groups. No case has been made in terms of agriculture or other business need. No case has been made in terms of retirement succession. It's not a farm that's being transferred to a family member. It's not a remote area identified in the local plan. So none of those aspects are relevant in relation to the small building group. The assessment has been carried out and for the reasons set out in paragraphs 4.5, 4.6 and 4.7, it is concluded that there is no suitable small building group in this particular location. Paragraph 4.9 talks about the design of the dwelling, and it's considered, for the reasons set out in that paragraph, that the design is not acceptable in this rural location.
Chair, I'll just come back to interpretation. I mean, H3 talks about small building groups, but it also says that where applicable, 3 or more separate habitable or occupied houses which are well related. I would suggest that they are well related.
I wouldn't want to a bun fight, but David, do you want to just deal with Archie?
Yeah. Do you care to rephrase that? I think the critical phrase is the last line in that. It's, yes, you have to have 3 or more separate habitable and occupied houses, and then this is the key bit, which are well related to each other and which create a sense of place. Now, when you look at that slide there, to me, what I'm seeing is a lot of agricultural buildings and 3 houses which are pointing in opposite directions. I don't think you could argue that that meets a small building group. And if you actually look at the, well, in that case, if you're saying it's an exception to policy, then through you, Chair, but the key issue is I haven't actually heard anything which says that there's an essential need for that house at this location. That I haven't actually, there's no case actually been submitted
Chair, come back through that.
Boys, can we just try through the chair? It's obviously an officer's view and a member's view. That's where we're going with this. And you had your opportunity to present a case. If you want to come back, Archie, that's fine. Then allow other members to come.
As I said before, Chair, it's supplementary guidance or is defined as 3 or more separate habitable or occupied houses which are well related to each other. It doesn't necessarily have to be a small building group that this actually is in. So there are issues, of course, and I'll come back to what was suggested earlier on, that there was trying to get some discussion with officers on this particular one, but there was a lack of communication. That's something that we need to deal with as part of the process, I think. But the situation is that it's a family-run business. The family stay within the area. There is a need, I believe, because of the situation within the family, the security of the business itself. And as I suggested before, I'm going to make that recommendation that I will accept that is an exception to policy because of the officer's recommendation, but I suggest that we allow this to happen. And I would hope that we get a seconder.
Thanks, Archie. I've got Ian Carruthers and Jane Maitland.
Thanks, Chairman. Happy to support Archie in this case, but I think he touched on a couple of relevant points I picked up on earlier, in particular to the needs of the person themselves, the locality and the business, and how that would potentially help the local economy. He spoke about the wider economy, but I think the local economy, the wider economy, and a particular need, I think they were relevant points why there could be an exceptional case made here. Certainly I heard Archie saying something resembling that phraseology.
That's fine, Ian. I think David quite rightly said that they've never presented a case that illustrates the need. That's the point David's making. But I get what you're saying. You've seconded it. That's fine.
Yes, and just so I'm clear, Chair, it was what Archie laid forward, that there was a demonstrated need, and the business itself, I think he mentioned, was maybe expanding, and obviously there's implications to the local economy in that case, so therefore overriding.
Jane, and then Andy.
I'm slightly at a loss here because unless I'm reading a completely different report, I honestly don't think that any case has been made. I don't think it's been presented, and I don't think it's been made. And if that had been put in front of us, then I think what councillors are suggesting would be perfectly reasonable. But in this particular issue, I'm afraid I don't think there has been that case put forward for us to seriously consider making an exception to policy. I also found that slide actually there really quite helpful, I suppose, because it it highlights where these particular buildings sit in relation to the selection of buildings that are there for an agricultural purpose. I know that people talk about interpretation, but by my interpretation, I really do not feel that those particular buildings sit together and create a cohesive whole. And on that basis, together with the fact that there's been no mention of security and no mention of family and no statement of business requirement made, I think we've got to stick by our policies. Otherwise, we simply explode them at this point, and I don't think that's a sensible thing to do. So I would support the recommendations, Chairman.
Thanks for that, Jane. David, do you want anything to add to what Jane said?
Well, just really to reiterate the same things, that the only claimed case, which I understand has been made for this, is that it is considered to be a small building group, and all the other categories have not been submitted as a case to us, and therefore it's not really been put before members today as grounds for consideration. There's no essential need claim been made. There's certainly no claimed need for the I happen to know Sam, so I mean, there's no claimed need put forward for him. And again, I'd refer you to page 151. There was reference, Councillor Dryburgh made to remote rural locations mentioned in SPP. What you're seeing at the edge of that is Gretna. I mean, it's not remote by any stretch of the imagination. It's a short drive from there across the 75, and you're in Gretna. So it's difficult to see that there is this essential needs for agriculture or business. And it's whether or not, yes, there might be some economic spin-off, but is it so material at that location? It has to be at that location, and the benefit to the region as a whole is going to override planning policy. I haven't heard a case to justify it, I'm afraid.
I've got Andy Ferguson, then I've got Stephen Thompson, and I'll let you back in last.
Thanks, Chair. I take David Lindsay's comments well-intentioned and informative as always, but it comes down to definitions again. And remote, if you've got Down syndrome, as we know, right, doesn't have to be in the back and beyond. It doesn't actually give us the thing there is it is not in the main township of Gretna. It's in a rural area.
Sorry, Chair, that's remote. These orange ones are defined in the LDP as the council's remote areas.
I appreciate that, but that's within the LDP, David, and I was saying it was well intentioned, and I took your point that in terms of technically you're correct. But I'm saying in the wider definition of remote, right? Given the family circumstances and the people who are going to be living in that house, and I would suggest, if it's approved, that it is remote for them. And I'm happy to support Archie in this process.
At the moment, according to Gillian, there's a doubt about the motion. You can't take family circumstances into consideration. Not part of the planning process. You know, to interrupt, Ian. We'll deal with this. If you want to speak, you put your hand up, you get your turn. The same as everybody else in the room. Somebody shouted medical, and it sounded like you. Is there anybody? Jock McKee. Sorry, Stephen Thompson did ask first, and then Jock McKee.
Thank you, Chair. I'd quite happily second Councillor Maitland. I'm looking at item 15 in the planning applications papers here, and what's in front of me. And even though I've heard a representation being made, what I'm looking at here is based on, as far as I can see, the best information we've got to go forward. I'm happy to second the Councillor Maitland's movement.
Councillor McKee.
Aye, thanks, Chair. I think I kind of sympathy with what Archie said, but as you say, medical conditions are no in the planning application, nothing whatsoever to do with it. What I get for that aerial view is that that group of housing, they're all within identifiable boundaries, and there's not an identifiable boundary for this proposal. And I think we've all been here long enough to know that if we don't have an identifiable boundary, you're opening the door to building groups that run on and run on. And on that basis, I would certainly support the recommendations. With due respect to the people and some of the reasons, but that's no plan application. We need to stick to the plan application or making a rope for our necks.
I've got Archie and then Jim McCormick, and I think unless there's somebody anxious, we'll go to the decision.
Chair, as I said before, I think there is an issue with communication, and that's been raised before, but I don't want to bring that back into this particular application. I did say that there was an issue with security in the area, that the business has just moved up there. It's an agricultural forestry business. The particular area in itself, I think, would fit in well with the area, and it's my interpretation. But I would like to see this is given as an exception to policy with the conditions agreed by officers and those statutory consultees, which within the thing, they've actually made some conditions that they would support. There has been no statutory consultees against this build.
Jim McCormick.
Thanks, Chair. I would agree with Stephen Thompson. We've got to judge this on the basis of the information presented to us in the paper. There are 3 dwellings there, but I'm not convinced that they form a sense of place. And I think that is the issue.
Okay, if there's nobody else want in, we have a motion from Archie Driver, seconded by Ian Carruthers. We've got an amendment by Jane Maitland, seconded by Stephen Thompson. Can you just remind us, firstly, tell us whether or not the motion is competent in its entirety, or whether or not it can be amended to be competent, and then whether or not I presume that the amendment is, because it's simply go with the recommendation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, for that. And it's perhaps something that I will double check with Mr. Sutty. Councillor Driver put forward a motion seconded by Councillor Carruthers to approve as an exception to policy that there is a demonstrated the need for the dwelling house, and it's an essential to agriculture and business needs. And I just want to double check that is competent with Mr. Sutty, if that's...
David?
In short, no, because we haven't had that case actually put to us. It wasn't submitted to us on that basis. There was no essential need for agricultural business purposes put forward, nor as an economic case been submitted. So I can't say that's a competent justification on the merits of what's actually been presented before us.
Okay, an attempt to unravel that somehow, Ian Carruthers has asked to speak.
Thanks, Chair. No, I just want to add comment. I mean, I did hear Archie picking up when there was, again, a demonstrable medical need, and I think it was sorry, sorry about that. I mean, I felt Archie was conveying earlier that there was a medical need here. Has to be close to the proximity of his family for the sake of his medical needs, and I think maybe Councillor Ferguson picked up on that as well. But I do think there's also attached to this is the impact on the local economy. I think that is material in this case.
I think the difficulty we've got, Ian, is there isn't anything in the paper that says the family has applied for this in medical need. So you can't introduce new stuff without having a supporting evidence. So that can't be part of the proposal. That's what Gillian's saying. Maybe economic opportunities and development can. Who wants first shot at that? You, David? In terms of medical need, what's the position?
Well, no claimed need has been put forward, so it's not being considered. It's rare that you would actually have a justification for a house on medical need, because the house will be there for a lot longer than that specific need. So it's very unusual for that to be considered as a justification. In terms of the economic benefit, again, that case hasn't been made, and we would have to be satisfied for that to be competent to really clearly demonstrate that there was such an economic benefit to the area that it overrode the Council's adopted policies in these matters. And again, I haven't seen a case that's come forward to demonstrate that, I'm afraid.
Archie?
Perhaps to clarify then, Chair, I think this application should be granted because it is well related to its landscape setting and of an appropriate scale and design to its location, and this policy is supported by supplementary guidance, which is in H3 for reasons given. That's my suggestion.
David? I think, well, within, if it's within reason, we're going to have to go, we'll get into a debate all night about interpretation of H3. You've got the officer's interpretation of H3, the local member's interpretation. And I suppose all these things are subjective. So, Andy?
Thanks. Through you, Chair, can maybe get some explanation from David. There's 3 dwelling houses there, and in the paper 4.7, it's saying they're not related. Are we really to say that 3 houses in close proximity aren't related because they don't all face each other, or they don't? That to me doesn't seem make any sense, because it would mean we'd have to have every single house facing exactly the same way, or into each other. That's what it's actually saying here in that paragraph.
I think what Councillor Maitland's saying is there's a firm between them, so they're not really related in as much as they're not adjacent to each other, they're in close proximity. But you did ask for David to explain that, so David.
That's one part of it, is they're well related to each other and which create a sense of place. That's the test of whether or not it's a small building group. And certainly our professional opinion is that on the slide there does not create a sense of place. You could argue that they are physically related to each other, albeit with agricultural buildings in between, but I can't see that has a small building group. If you went down the road from there and you went to Rig, that's a small building group. That has a sense of place. If you actually look on the plan on page 151, you will see a number of farms and associated farm buildings that go with them and houses. Each of them is not a small building group. They don't have a sense of place.
Okay. So Gillian, just go through the motion and the amendment. And at the end of the day, you have to be satisfied that it is competent, but there is a saving grace in there that H3 isn't open to individuals' interpretation. If you're no competent, if you're no satisfied it's competent, you're going to have to say that.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Dryborough had put forward, when we went back to him, to approve the exception to policy as the application was well related to the landscape setting and appropriate in scale and design of location.
Gillian's obviously looking for advice from David, maybe.
Chair, there is advice we can get with David. We don't have to agree with it. You know what I mean? It's just advice at the end of the day.
At the same time, we're not going to a situation where an officer of this council is telling us that a motion isn't competent and we're going to run with it anyway. We can't do that. So we need professional guidance. And if she needs reference from case officers, then that has to be the case. Otherwise, it'll be subject to a complaint and possibly being called back. Ian.
Thanks, Chairman. I mean, the question of competence is down to yourself. You determine that, and I'll certainly take your view as being the end, the final view, and it is appropriately. I think the question is that's coming up here that I'm finding difficult. I'm repeating myself because I've said this so many times. That when it comes to policy, planning policy, an individual council member can put a different interpretation for an officer. Every other policy in the council we can quite clearly, because we've got a different view. But for some reason, when it comes to the question of competency, I think it's more difficult. If it was up for approval and we got to refuse, that's a wee bit more awkward then. I think we may be looking at that and that'll come back as a report at some time. But I mean, I'm still supportive that Councillor Driver actually's got a different view to the interpretation is. I agree with his interpretation in this particular instance, and I still support him as long as it's competent. And that's your decision, Chairman.
Right. Motion amendment. Remind members who did what.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. The motion by Councillor Dryborough, seconded by Councillor Carruthers, to approve as an exception to policy as the application is well related to the landscape setting and appropriate in scale and design of location. And this would be with appropriate planning conditions, and the amendment by Councillor Maitland, seconded by Councillor Thompson, to refuse the application as detailed in the report. Councillor Dempster.
Amendment.
Councillor Blake.
Amendment.
Councillor Dryborough.
Motion.
Councillor Ferguson.
Motion.
Councillor Geddes.
Motion.
Councillor Maitland.
Amendment.
Councillor McCautry. Councillor McComb.
Amendment.
Councillor McKee.
Amendment.
Councillor Syme. Councillor Thompson.
Amendment.
Councillor Witts.
Amendment.
Councillor Carruthers, I
Motion.
apologise.
Motion, that's fine.
With 5 votes to the motion and 7 to the amendment, the application has been refused as detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, members. We'll go to item 16. Change of use of agricultural land to form extension to existing cemetery at land between Lawliston Road and the River Fleet, not the River of Fleet, but the River Fleet, Memory Lane, Gatehouse of Fleet. Application is a full plan permission. Recommendation approved subject to conditions. Case officer Judith Turnbull, reference 15/P/2/0057. Judith, will you take us through your presentation, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yes, this is an application for an extension to the cemetery at Gatehouse of Fleet. This is a location plan. The application site's in the top, outlined in red. It's to the north of Gatehouse of Fleet, at the end of Memory Lane. This is the extension, existing extension. The existing cemetery, sorry. This is a previous extension, and this is the application site here. The extension is 55 metres long, 20 metres wide. The existing road, which comes up here, would extend through here, and this is a path 1.8 metres wide, which would go up the length of the extension. And the proposal is for it to be bounded by post and wire fencing around the perimeter with no gates up here, or this is a car parking area at the moment. There would be nothing here, and the entrance would be from the existing cemetery. This is the view towards the existing cemetery from Memory Lane. This is the only approach road, and the extension is on the north of the cemetery, so it's in there. You can't really see the site yet. This is taken from the existing car parking area, and this is the previous extension, so the application site is in here. This is a view from the north. There's a core path that runs up here. So the extension would come out here, along there and down there. So it runs along that side. The extension is along the western boundary walls. The extension will come out there 20 metres and along like that. And this is the view from the existing car park. This is the main part of the cemetery, and here the existing extension here, and the proposal would come out 20 metres and down that way. And the final slide is just taken over where the application site is, kind of looking north-east. So, as necessary with applications such as this, SEPA were consulted and originally objected to the application due to contaminants. Additional investigation was carried out and information was submitted, and as a result, SEPA lifted their objection. So, subject to a condition requiring the boundary treatment to be dry stone dikes to match the existing extension. The application is recommended for approval.
Nothing to do with planning, but I can't see why when there's all that spare ground there. But anyway, questions for case officer? Stephen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just on the SEPA consultation process, which was obviously went on for a bit as they requested further information, but I was just wondering, they seem to be satisfied given the proposed density, if you like, of burials in the proposed additional plot. So I'm just wondering, is that captured in the how we might approve this in terms of a condition?
Judith?
The actual SEPA process was very complicated and had stage 1, stage 2 and stage 3 assessments. They did investigate the level of burials, but in the end SEPA relaxed their requirements because it wasn't looking very good for the approval.
Thanks, Stephen. Any other question for officers? In that case, we're in session. Archie, then Jane.
Chair, I remember going through this with Gretna about over 15 years trying to get a cemetery. If this helps that situation, happy to agree with the recommendations, Chair.
Jane?
Well, Chairman, looking at this, I think there possibly is a grave danger that this could be considered ribbon development in the countryside. But I do accept, with disrespect to housing in the countryside, there is a strong medical need and the plots will be well related to each other. So agree the recommendation.
Oh, that's a bit desperate, Jane. In that case, Gillian, can you confirm the decision, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that the application has been approved subject to the conditions detailed in the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Gillian. Item 17, erection of dwelling house and installation of septic tank in Soakaway. Approval of matters specified in conditions 2, layout, 3, design, 4, external appearance, 5, landscaping of planning permission in principle 14P1 /0654 at plot 1, Brayfield Poultry Unit, Stranraer. Application type approval of matters specified in conditions. Recommendation approve unconditionally. Case officer Andrew Robinson, and the reference is 15/B/10207. Andrew, take us through your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this application effectively for full details of a previously approved planning permission in principle application for a dwelling that was approved at the Planning Applications Committee back in April of this year. And just a quick recap for those members who remember this application and those that weren't on the committee then. The site's located at Brayfield Poultry Farm just outside of Stranraer, located on the northern side of the A718 road as you head out to the west. And the application that's been put forward is for plot 1, which was the westernmost site of the 3 applications that were submitted for this site. This is the existing site plan, and really the things to look at on this site plan are the site levels. For those that remember the site visit, the site levels slope downwards quite steeply towards the rear of the site. And this is the proposed layout, so it's a detached dwelling set within the middle of the plot with a garage to the front and an informal access driveway serving the site. This also shows the proposed landscaping as well, which is effectively to maintain an element of the grassland. And what you can see just here is actually a regraded land level, the reason for which I'll come on to in a second. And this is the proposed elevations of the house, so 2-storey dwelling house, as said before, pitched roof, and the garage to the side. And throughout the course of the application, we asked for further details of the cross-section, particularly at the rear. So obviously we just wanted to be a bit certain how the land levels were going to be regraded to accommodate the rear of the dwelling. And this slide demonstrates that actually there's going to be land raising, which is highlighted in blue. Effectively, the land levels will be regraded, and as demonstrated on the bottom slide, will then be to slope away following the natural land levels. And this is the site from a farm access track opposite the site. So effectively, that's where the proposed dwelling would be, in the top left-hand corner, effectively. The proposed garage would be sort of in this position just here. This is leading into the site, so that's where the access road would lead in. And this is effectively what you would see as the whole front of that, of the dwelling and the garage there. It just gives you an impression of what the land levels are like. So this is where the land levels would be regraded to accommodate the rear of the dwelling, and from the side as well, just to show how that would appear. So officers have recommended this application for unconditional approval.
Questions for case officer, members? None. In that case, we're in session. Archie?
As it's no H3, you agree with the recommendations?
Thanks, Archie. Unanimous? Okay. Thanks very much, members. Thank you for your attendance today. Gillian, can you just confirm the decision of members, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that this application has been approved unconditionally. Thank you.
Thanks for your forbearance, members, today.